this meeting to order. Would you all stand and follow on the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Fenton.
Here.
Denham. Cooper.
Here.
Milton.
Here.
Rodriguez.
Here.
Howden. LeBlanc.
Here.
Your Honor, you have a quorum.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I'm going to start a regular agenda item before we move into the budget we have on here. This item is the first reading of Bill Number 6204, an ordinance amending the adopted 2022 budget for the City of Branson, Missouri to adjust monies in the tourism fund for an increase in tourism marketing expenses.
Thank you. We'll get a staff report from Mr. Ben Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. This amendment has to do with the marketing portion of the tourism fund. So for the public and others that don't know, the tourism fund is split into two functions, 25% of it in marketing, 75% of it that goes toward infrastructure. What this does is take the surplus that's in the marketing side and rolls it over into the 22 budget to be allowed to be spent for marketing. And it is the rollover of only the surplus in that 22 budget, or 21 budget, marketing.
Okay, you've heard the first reading of Bill 6204. Do I have a motion approving this bill?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. We're doing a roll call vote, Madam Clerk, is that right?
Yeah, do we have any discussion?
Oh, discussions. Oh, yeah, discussions. Does anybody in the audience have anything they would like to share on this bill? Any aldermen have any discussion on this? Hearing none, let's vote.
Roll call vote. Fenton.
Yes.
Cooper.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
LeBlanc.
Yes.
Your Honor, that passes 4-0.
Very nice.
Your Honor, I move to read Bill number 6204 for its final reading due to being able to do marketing before end of year.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions from the audience? Any questions from the board? Hearing none, let's vote.
Fenton.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Cooper, sorry.
Yes.
And LeBlanc.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passed 4-0.
Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, would you please provide the introduction for this item on its second and final read?
Your Honor, this is the final reading of Bill Number 6204, an ordinance amending the adopted 2022 budget for the City of Branson, Missouri to adjust monies in the tourism fund for an increase in tourism marketing expenses.
You've heard the final reading of Bill 6204. Do I have a motion approving this bill?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments from the audience? Any comments from the board? Hearing none, let's vote.
Fenton.
Yes.
Cooper.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
LeBlanc.
Yes.
Motion carried 4-0.
Thank you. Now, Madam Clerk, would you please take a roll call for the Finance Committee, please?
Fenton.
Here.
Denham. LeBlanc.
Here.
Milton.
Here.
Stepp. Here. Yancey. Here. Meenan. Here. McConnell. Your Honor, you have a quorum.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the next item is a discussion of the City of Branson's 2023 preliminary budget and capital improvements plan.
We will begin with a brief introduction from Ben Hart.
I'm glad you said brief introduction. That limits my time to speak. So good afternoon. I'm excited to be here because of all the work that we've been able to pull together with directors, the executive team, and everything kind of culminates into this afternoon's discussion. This afternoon, we've got a number of things to talk about, and before we bring up the agenda, I just want to remind the board and the finance committee, this is our first time through this. We did as much as, we feel like we've got 99% of everything accounted for and accumulated. There will be more than likely some tweaks as we move forward. We want to do a last sweep of the departments to make sure everything that on the line items, they understand what they are, and that we also get it right for the final budget. What you have before you is going to be substantially changed, substantially not changed in any form, with the exception of some movement of departments that maybe we still have yet to do, or not departments, but divisions. For this afternoon's conversation, I've got Tracy Henderson keeping track of what I call a parking lot of questions. So if there are questions that we do not answer today, we can make note of those and publish them. That way we can get them out. And that goes for the board, and if we open it up later for public comment, we're going to do the same thing. Our intent is to write those questions down and go ahead and get them published. And get those published hopefully by the next meeting.
If you don't mind me interjecting. I wanted the public to know, and those that are in the audience, the intent of this meeting, it was scheduled for 5 hours, and you'll see as we go through this presentation, there is a tremendous amount of information that Ben's going to shovel at us. And so the intent is, I will encourage public comment, but please respect the fact that what's most important is for the board to be educated with this information. And so with time permitting, we will allow public comment. I just felt like it's most important for this board to get all the information Ben wants to provide. Right. If by chance there is no public comment today, just know that when this gets presented to the Board of Aldermen, that's when there will absolutely be open comment.
Right, there'll be a public hearing, right?
There'll be a public hearing. Yeah. Do we have a date scheduled for that, please?
We're hoping that will be the first meeting in November.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And we will also have the water, that's also water and sewer, we have to have a public hearing. So there's two to come.
2 of them, right.
Thank you.
So ways that this document can change. We talked about cleanup or last minute items. More importantly, today's discussion. There's a lot of information in here, and the department directors did a fantastic job putting together their priorities and capital submissions and priorities within the FTEs, the people they've got as well. And do not hesitate to ask about the organizational chart or any of the positions. I'm going to encourage you guys, if you have questions, do not wait till the end of that presentation. Well, except for Kendall. I think he's got an hour and a half presentation, right, Kendall? So he's going to take a lot of time. But this book can be changed by you guys in your comments. We'll take those into account. That's the whole reason that it's a draft document. So your inclusion will be important, or your comments for that matter. The other comment I've got is understand the 2023 budget is based off the 22 budget, looking also at 21. And as you guys well know, because we've talked about it all year, 21 and 22 were very different years. Were very austere years. Not a lot of capital happened. Not a lot of expenses went out. 23 changes that. So just understand there's maybe some differences in numbers. And we'll delineate those as we go by, and if you got questions, obviously we'll handle those as well. So what we've got in front of you, my intent today is to go ahead and put up everything that you'll have or is already in the packet is going to be up on the wall. So including the presentations that Jan has and Kendall's got. So we're going to go through everything on the wall, and that's really where we're going to start our discussions. So right here, this kind of gives you an overview of what the day looks like. I want to show you the 5-year forecast. I will promise I will not make you an accountant or a budget manager by looking at these, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of your eyes goes crossed. I just want to make sure you understand what it is we're doing and how we do it when we look into the future for decisions today. And I think that's very important to do for any entity, especially Branson, with as much as you got going on, is huge. Jan's going to come up and talk about the staffing needs studies and the prioritization and implementation of positions moving forward. I talked about last time we met where we actually put into the budget all of the positions to try to stress the general fund out as much as possible and ended up not stressing it out a whole lot. But it's there, so it gives us the maximum flexibility to put positions in play. So he'll go through what that prioritization looks like. He's got some other conversations with about compensation as well. So Jan will come up next after I get done with the 5-year forecast. Talking about number 3, compensation. That kind of takes care of 90%, or I'm going to say 75% of the cost throughout the city, since we're a service-driven industry, right? And one of the most important is our people, and making sure that they have what they need to perform what they need to do. So then we're going to have the departments come up and tell you about what they've got in their budget, what they've included. We're going to break it down into 2 sections. Employees, you know, what's important, what's inside that budget, what that request looked like and why it was there. And it's less of a justification, more of an operational discussion. That's where we want you guys to really interact, understand what those positions are, because it's important. And I'm going to pick on Keith. He'll have maintenance positions in here. He's going to talk about some of the backlog he's got, right? So that's going to be important to understand as a governing body what it is I know he wants to do. Now, everybody's going to be the same way. They're all going to have priorities. And I think that kind of conversation is going to be critical for this budget to be a success. And I say that because this budget is a living document. And we talked about that too. Having a way to amend it moving forward, should we have revenues that come in ahead of time, or we have expenses that come down, or capital projects that swap over, that we can come back to you guys with a budget amendment and make things happen on the fly and keep it going. So we'll have all the departments go through their information. The items up here in color are requests and comments we've gotten ahead of time from governing body members. We want to hit each one of those as we go through this. And departments have this as well. I'm going to be down here as they talk if we've got other questions that we need to answer. I do want to thank Tracy and Sunday for helping put this book together. Sunday has been a huge help to us. And then Colby's over there in the corner. He does exist. He's not just a computer and an AI. We allowed him out of the office so he'd come down and help with the conversation. Those two know, well, he definitely knows a lot about what's in this budget. And he understands what this process is. That's the benefit we have. So that's, well, yeah, so the Big Rock information as well, that's all the stuff we receive we want to make sure we follow up on. And then the last item that we have today is going to be wrap up or next steps. Where do we go from here? And that's really going to depend on you as a governing body and what you need the next steps to look like. If we get through everything today, fantastic. If you want to see some stuff brought back, which under item number 5, we're going to schedule those out. So those will be follow-up. If we have questions we can't answer, those will be follow-up. So we can kind of talk a little bit about what the rest of the year looks like at that point. So that's what I've got on the agenda. Any questions on the agenda? The only other thing I've got to say is Chyna agreed to get refreshments for us. It's a 5-hour meeting. We're going to start with drinks. She's got some snacks to come in too later. So she'll be bringing those in for us. And then that's open to everybody, not just the board of aldermen. So with that, can we put that 5-year forecast up? This is where I'm going to make your eyes go crossed. And let's go all the way to the top. And you can blow that up to where my grandmother can see it. There we go. So what we've got here is the green bar is our beginning reserve balance, beginning fund balance is what we call it. That green bar starts, and you'll see up at the top, our fiscal 22 budget. Right next to that column is our 22 estimate. That's where we estimate the year to end. A long time ago, I'm going to say in May, that was like 3 years ago, in May, when we came to you guys and say, look, we go through the budget process, we're going to give you an idea where we think May is going to land, or 22 is going to land. That's that estimate column, right? And then 23's budget year is in there. And then the 5 years after that is our sandbox, if you will. It's our guess for the rest of the 5 year. So what that does is tell the public, and we'll be able to publish this too, but it tells everybody that what we're doing in 23 affects years out, right? In each one of these funds. The blue line is the ending fund balance for that year. And I'll use 23's example, for instance. You see the 10,000,005 that's up there in the beginning fund balance in that green line. Right under that is the 8.5 million, right? That's the ending fund balance. It's a $2 million difference. There's $2 million negative in there, and the reason that exists, go right to the bottom if you would. The reason that exists is because of what we've included in this budget and the 5 years. So if you look, could you highlight, and Colby, you want to highlight the positions line? I just spoke about the positions we included. That's where they are. So that's the stress test we're using on the fund balance. We're going to put that in there just to see what that looks like. And the departments are going to really, and each one of the funds that have people in it have this in there. So they're going to come up and talk about what those positions look like instead of doing it all at once. And then the next line here is the capital recommendation. You'll see 582,000 in 23. Nothing's in the rest of the years. So that's a discretionary number, right? You can add to it or lower it, however you feel like you need to do on an annual basis, or for that matter, every 6 months we can look at it and add and deduct to it. And then that line, last line we talked about, I was served up fairly easy questions about what we're doing with the police department and the fire department and the back pay, if you will, that you had requested. That's in there as well. Now, the 1.4 is not just, the back pay was around 900,000, right? So the 900,000 is in there, and I think I forget what the rest of it is, but there's another piece in there as well, but we'll go through that. So I wanted to make sure you guys saw that. Could you go to the next tab just to show them? So I'm only going to go through, this is tourism fund. That first one was general fund. This is the tourism fund. When you saw it last time from me, it was a bar chart that showed the fund balance, and it was fairly significant, if you will, the change. And the reason being this, you can see that blue bar again, that fund balance, 23 million by the end of 22, 17 million in 23. Tourism fund, obviously this is one just like the budget amendment split into two functions, right? 25 and 75%. This is both functions, right? Both of those are included in this fund. So 17 million's in there. We just decided so 21's not in here. So 21 will have money rolling into 22. But the $6 million there is projects. Those are all projects. And we'll go through those as well. But that leaves us a good solid fund balance into the future. And we do have projects loaded into this. I'm going to say an allocation for projects every year. This is the one year we did allocate projects every year into the 5-year forecast. And we still have a fairly significant balance. The reason I wanted to show you this one, because this one and the general fund both have consumption tax in it, sales tax and tourism tax. And those could change dramatically in a month. And I'm going to say increase. We tried to put what we could justify as the bottom in for 22 and then build that budget off of that, knowing full well it's easier to go up and add projects in than it is to go down. So what we're going to do is come back to you and say, here's the projects down the list. We were able to fund number 6. We're going to go through 7, 8, and 9. And we're going to go ahead and fund those, and here we go. But I wanted to make sure that we made that point that that's out there. In the out years, the 5 years that we did, Colby and I did bring that down to what you've experienced in the past. I really hope that that is not right. That's about $4 to $5 million off, and that'll increase. We've got some significant projects in here, and the CIP is made up of 23 all the way to 27, right? And there's some significant projects in here for 23, 4, and 5. And we'll go through those as well.
I have a question. On line 25, the revenue column,
Right.
we're showing a significant decrease from 23 of 16 million into,
Yeah, that's the
24.
tourism tax. That's where we're bringing it down to historical revenue levels. In my mind, that's
I
probably
see.
too low.
you're right, that is
And
historical.
we're going to come back and change that.
That's
By
historical.
November, we're probably going to be changing that number. Because the increases every month are starting to decrease, that percentage is starting to decrease. Even if we end the year as a 3% increase, it's 3% higher than where we've ever seen it before.
That's right.
And that matters, obviously. So I'd rather be really
Thank you.
under. And that's probably the biggest change here. And we can include this, every quarter for you guys to take a look at it as well. I know we're going to show the directors what this looks like and map it out and see what decisions we need to make on a quarterly basis, at least, moving forward. You want to go to public safety? And blow that one up too. There we go. This one, this is police, right? Yeah, this is the police department. And I had this in the bar charts too in the last time. Same thing, fund balances. We're managing fund balances at this point. That blue line's one we're really managing. Anytime you go 5 years out, it's typical to see that fund balance, that 1.3 million you see there. It's usually negative. I've been doing this for 30 years, and you always see that number negative. Very rarely do you see it positive. I know when Colby showed me this the first time, I called him and said, really, are you sure? We poured through this thing several times. It's still positive. Now it's positive because one reason, that's because capital's not built into this on the way out. And each year we'll have to look at that and we know that everybody has capital needs. Police and fire have capital needs. So we'll bolt that in there as well. So that fund balance is what that looks like. Let's go to the last one on fire. Fire fund is pretty much the same way. We've got a $1.8 million number in there. The difference there is going to be Fire Station 4, right? That one's going to come online either 23 or 24. Most of the expenses we expect to be in 23. And then blowing that out into the future as well. It's the same way. There's really, the only capital that's built into there annually is what we've got built in for Fire Station 2, potential funding if we need it. And we'll bring that up this afternoon as well. Along with the fire truck that goes into that station, or into 4. So we've got that built in. And then if you talk to fire, you're going to go 5 years out, there's always capital needs in there. Not infrastructure, there'll be capital needs, rolling stock and other capital. That'll always exist, and we just need to make sure we maintain that availability of that cash. That's the 5-year forecast. Now, those are only 4 of the funds. We do it for every fund. We've got parks. We didn't bring parks. There's plenty of funds that we do that with. I didn't want to overbore you. I just wanted to make sure you saw the numbers behind the charts that we brought up, and we're going to actively manage this. Now, you also see the scenarios, and that's really for Colby, not us. As we go through today, if a thought comes to you, well, what about if we, let us know what that is, and what he can do is change this on the fly to see what it looks like. Great. And if we add or deduct, he can bring it back up at the end of the meeting and say, here's where we stand. Right. Now, that's ahead of everything getting cleaned up, but it'll tell you where we stand. But for the most part, well, for all the part, everything the departments are going to talk about is in this document. They're already built into the 5-year forecast. So any questions from there? Otherwise, I'll let Jan come up and start talking.
Just had a quick question. The green fund balance, is that your reserve balance? That is the department's threshold?
It's the beginning, yeah.
So
yeah.
Ideally, do you want to see the reserve balance slowly ticking up to keep in tune with possible inflation or adjustment for time?
In an ideal world, we'd be looking at keeping the blue line flat, which is the ending reserve balance. We'd be try to manage that for a flat. We typically have it as a negative, a low number. This is really encouraging because I know just how much capital that needs to be built into the future in these. So after this budget gets done, what we're going to do is go back to the departments and say, okay, what does this look like if we build everything in? And that way we have a place to start from, because they've got spreadsheets, some of that will back this up. And so we feed their spreadsheets into ours and roll it up at once, and then we are going to continue to meet with them to make sure we can keep that alive.
Ben, isn't it true too, though, that historically our reserve balance has probably been a little more conservative?
Oh, yeah.
So to see these numbers
Yes.
drop down doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong.
No,
we're just getting it more in line with probably where we could have been and should have been.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the city's got a 30% reserve policy, and that's going to be our target right there. Anything above that may be fair game. We've got a strong management team, and Kathy obviously is going to have a huge input of what that looks like. But yeah, you're right. It's a 30% fund balance. If I would have come to you in 19 to do this same exercise, I'll guarantee you that 5th year would have been negative. You'd see a typical forecast at that point. We're enjoying the fact that we have revenues excelling faster than what we thought. And it's not just Branson. This is nationwide. Every client that I've got have sales tax growth they've never seen before. A lot of it's use tax. In areas that have use tax, because people stay home and start ordering, there's use tax just blowing up. Expansion of a lot of communities because of the remote workforce. those are blowing up. So that's just brand new sales tax coming into an entity. And staying on the ground and not flying for vacation was one of the things we see, just the traffic going up. So those are all parts of this.
Ben, I know we have apparently excessive funds in here. Were these amounts grown to these levels over the last couple of years, or?
Yeah. They've been over the last few years, yeah. I'm gonna say last 3 years.
Okay.
You had the dip, but you guys managed your way down through that dip. And now it's coming back up, and because it's coming back up, we're starting to gain that cash balance. We can put it to work.
Thank you.
Anything else? I will turn it over to Jan.
Does this work with that?
It will. Which one do you want to put up first, Jan?
The
Oh, I see.
slide presentation of the staffing analysis, please.
Jen, I went through these last night, and I'm going to tell you, I had a hard time going to sleep. The information I read in this was so uplifting and so encouraging. I couldn't wait for this part of the presentation.
Well, as Mayor, members of the board, as you can see, we went through a staffing study. We did an RFP for a staffing study, and we got part of one response, if you will. We did a staffing, we wanted a staffing study, and we wanted a salary study. We had people stand in line to do the salary part. That's the easy part. But the staffing part, where you have to actually spend time meeting with people, that's where people were balking and that kind of thing. So we didn't get what we wanted, so we went to the HR committee and said, look, we'll just do this ourselves. And that's what we did. So as such, one of the things we did is we did a staffing analysis. We met with each of the departments. Now, we started out with primarily with the 5 departments that were really kind of sinking, if you will, from a staff perspective. We looked at police, utilities, engineering, parks, and fire. Now, fortunately, fire, their turnover for 2022 is at 0. That's the good news. The rest of the story is, as we're sitting right now, police are sitting just a little over 20%. Utilities is 19.61. Engineering Public Works is 19.35. And Cindy's Parks is at 34.48. So it's getting kind of ugly out there. I had presented a salary suggestion a couple of years ago to try, the end goal was try to bring the bottom levels up to where we could have a buffer between what minimum wage is projected to be in 2023, January 1, 2023, and what our current minimum wage is. Typically, we have about a $4 an hour buffer in there, and that has been eroded, and it's pretty evident that's where we're losing folks at this point. So we need to get hot on that to get that fixed. So in this whole project, we looked at, we did a staffing analysis, and then we went through a process for determining internal equity. In our last compensation study that we had done several years ago, we used a firm that enabled us to have some tools that allowed us to look at the elements that for internal equity. And then we used different municipalities and different outside entities for the external equity with respect to job for job, position to position, pay to pay, that kind of thing. And then the last part of that is we incorporated all this into our current pay structure and our compensation model.
And as it says here, what I just talked about is, the hot topics that we really focused on were the ones that had the big turnover, and we need to get busy with those. We met with all the departments. They had input. They gave us their take on what the positions were. And then we went through and scored with respect to a series, a matrix, so that we could understand the urgency with respect to how we want to fill those positions. So here's the first one that we looked at with police. And, we went through this. We did our initial iteration, and we presented this to the Human Resources Committee. And then several of the directors said, hey, what about us? Others that weren't part of this list. So we incorporated that. The preponderance of all of the positions that Ben was talking about, even those that the hey, what about me folks chimed in on, they're included in the budget as well. But we want to look at this from a strategic perspective, because when you're incorporating 40-plus positions, that adds a lot of dollars to the payroll. So we've identified 16 primary ones that we want to make sure that we look at in 2023 and early 2024.
Okay, so for clarity, this isn't, if I'm reading this correctly, it's saying right now there are 7 police positions that are needed. We have more than 7 to fill, but there's 7 that are
These are new positions in addition
to the ones we need to fill.
Exactly. Because like right now, Jeff's got, I think he's got like 3 positions that he had reserved to set aside so that he could bump compensation for $2 an hour. We need to get those back so that we've got more officers on the streets.
Yeah, so just from, and I know that Jeff is going to ask to put those 3 positions back.
Hey, Jan, what's the color code mean?
Okay, the color code, and that's, I didn't do a good key up here, and I apologize for that. The yellow, it really should be red, meaning we need those like yesterday. And the lower that you get, my focus would be to focus on the overall score. A 4 and a 5 and a 6, those are going to be the highest level of focus that we want to really focus on, that overall score on the right. 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, those are going to be lower emphasis, that we can wait with those throughout the 2023, early 2024 cycle.
Jan, on all of these, but especially with police and fire, the staffing analysis, was this based strictly on request from the chiefs, or was there some research done comparing communities of similar, we're hard to compare size, but number of calls compared to staffing levels?
We did not have a lot of data to compare from in that respect. Now, on the public works side, we had open tickets and things like that, things that were outstanding get done. But we did do an evaluation with other entities to look at these kinds of things, but we just, they're close estimates is what they are.
Sure.
I'm sorry. The positions are what the chiefs and their staff identified. We validated those against other municipalities as well.
Perfect. And I only ask that because for so many years, I think a lot of our departments have been used to, you're going to get by with what we give you. They're afraid to ask for what they really need because if they ask for what they really need, what the community needs, they'll get nothing. It's, you eat what I give you or you're going to get nothing. So I don't know when these were done, and I'm just hopeful. Police, and I'm not a police scheduler, so sorry, Chief Matthews. I did some simple basic math and said, if we put 4 cars covering the city on any given shift. For the longest time, we ran with 3, and that's insane to me, but 4 is still insane to me, but we'll give them 4. With 2 people, I can't imagine in today's world that we should ever have a police car with 1 officer in it. It's just nuts if we're doing that. My opinion, sorry, guys. So if you have 4 cars, 2 people per car, that's 8 per shift, 3 shifts per day, 21 shifts per week, times 8 is 168, divided by the average number of shifts worked of 5. That's 36 personnel needed with 0 vacation, sick time, or days off. We're only asking for 42. Understand that's officers only, so it doesn't include detectives, lieutenant sergeants, and I know some of those guys are and gals are out on the streets as well. The same thing I see with fire, we're only asking to staff the new station. We're not really looking at, man, I mean, we're in the most conservative part of the country, in my opinion, and our taxpayers passed a tax for public safety. They've said loud and clear, this is what we want. There's a ton of data. Obviously, you're in HR and you know that. I hope this board, our community can get, our community has spoken. They speak every year on the survey. They spoke when they passed the tax. Minimums, I mean, we should never have 3 guys running a fire call, in my opinion. I'm not a firefighter, but that's crazy to me. I hope we're building on those numbers and not, unfortunately, the fear of if we ask for what we really need, we're going to get nothing.
So you brought up a couple of good points. The operational question, I want to reserve for when the experts get up here, because they're better at answering that. But just functionally, if I'm involved as a budget director and it has anything to do with budget, we treat capital the same way we ought to be treating the personnel. We go back and ask the departments for prioritization of capital, right? There are a bunch of projects out there that are not funded. So those have to be prioritized by those guys, because there's only so much they can get done, right? The same thing should be happening with FTEs. We shouldn't be telling them what we can't get done. They need to tell you guys what we need to get done. From there, we need to close the gap. That means if we have 18 officers, 4 of them are in my office, by the way, then we need to figure out how do we fund that. But that's a decision at a level, and hopefully Kathy agrees with this, that's a decision at a level that needs to be a public discussion, for that matter. That's the way we've run it in the past in my life, and it's paid off, because that puts a lot of information out there to the public.
But, Your Honor, we need to take a recess,
Okay,
please. Thank you.
Absolutely.
what's that?
So that was my
Oh.
answer, yeah.
Your answer was out of order.
lost a quorum.
We did not have a quorum. You'll have to repeat that.
Oh,
Take a recess.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Well, he caught it. Thank you.
We'll call this meeting back to order. Were you done, Ben? Okay.
Sorry.
Just to explain what happened, we lost our quorum for just a moment, and so when we didn't have a quorum, we took a recess. And now that we have the quorum, we will return to the meeting. And I also wanted to say real quick, for those that are listening, Ben has used the term a couple times, FTE. And so those that are listening online, that is full-time employees. So, Jan, you're on.
Okay, and I've argued against using that term for years simply because what happens in many situations, you've got somebody doing a job, they work diligently. It takes them 50 hours to do their job, though. That's truly 1.25 FTE, but it's still counted as one. So I use head count. Anyhow, as you can look at these, we've got these positions prioritized. To Betsy's point, these, and the same as what Ben had articulated earlier, we've got the preponderance of all the positions that people wanted already built into the budget. However, we found that these are the highest priority ones that we identified. And as we fill these, we will identify others along the way and fill those as needed.
Okay. For clarification, just so I can track, these are 7 positions in addition to the budgeted positions we have today.
Yes, sir.
So out of the budgeted positions, we don't have all those positions filled.
No, sir.
But as far as Ben numbers are concerned, Ben's projections include 100% filled positions plus 7 additional. Thank you.
So that's police. Whenever we look at fire, we've got those set up there. The differences in the scoring there have to do with the prospective open date and things like that, staging those in. One of the things that was mentioned was to have extra people in earlier so that we could alleviate some overtime and things like that. Fire personnel work a 2,912-hour annual schedule. And of that, 156 of those hours is scheduled overtime. So it's not going to alleviate that overtime, but there is additional overtime. So, you know, when you consider that you've got 3 or 4 on an apparatus, whatever the scheduling is at that point, if somebody's on vacation or sick or something like that, somebody has to be called in to cover, that generates additional overtime. So during that interim period, whenever we get more firefighters on the ground prior to Station 1 opening, that will offset some of those additional overtime costs, even though there will be an additional cost for that staff position. But then as you see there, you know, we've got fire captains. That leads the list there simply because of the overall complexity of the position, the criticality of it overall. And then we work down from there. The last two, the fire department has asked that we kind of put those on hold for now, but we will look at those again in the future with respect to an additional training officer and someone in for emergency management.
Excuse me, Jim, before you move. The first 3 line items, the 3 captains, 6 firefighters, 3 engineers, is that the same number of employees in each of our existing fire stations?
Yes, it would be for 3 shifts.
12,
So essentially,
12.
yeah. So what we would do in this process is we would promote 3 captains, 3 engineers, and go from there and hire 6 new firefighters.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to get the math right. So each of our firehouses right now have 12. And so by adding a 4th, we're going to be adding the same amount.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Parks and Recreation. This is one that, Mayor, we had talked about in one of our HR committee meetings where, you know, when it comes to this kind of thing, with respect to the compensation level for the entry-level staff being as where it was, and we trying to constrain our overtime, what happens in that kind of situation is, well, you still have the work to do. What happens? Supervisors fill in. And I bet you dollars to donuts that Cindy's got supervisors that are working a minimum of 60 to 80 hours a week during the summertime, and it's burning them alive. And so we want to get her some help. That's why you see this one is one of the unique ones where we've got a supervisor in that high critical area that we need to get that staffed as quickly as we can. And then we've got a couple of building maintenance and trail maintenance and things like that. And then we've got a need for an office assistant. There's just so much traffic that goes on out there that people are doing double and triple duty 75% of the time. And it's just one of those things that it's reflected with respect to the 34% turnover that we're experiencing.
Some of these are maybe entry-level positions that on there, building maintenance, trail landscape maintenance. Is that kind of like a entry position? Or
Yes.
is that someone that you would
that's
have to
more-
have?
That's going to be more entry level. Office Assistant 3 is a little bit above entry level, but it's, and then a supervisor obviously is going to be.
And we feel comfortable that the salaries that we're looking at for these are going to get us those roles? Because I know, just like in my business, I'm having a hard time filling entry level. And I mean, we've had to make increases in different things, but it's still very tough to get them filled, so.
I'll cover that in a bit. We've made a couple of steps in that entry level position. Could we do more? We probably need to at some point.
Thank you.
Because, yeah, your point is very accurate. And I contend that's part of the issue is that it's difficult to get the entry-level positions and because there's so many other funding mechanisms for those folks.
Well, and then they can go to, one of the holiday places over here and make $25 an hour. It's hard to compete with that, so, to get people, so.
Okay, and for this one, we're looking at maintenance worker 2. That is a step up from the maintenance worker 1, obviously. That's somebody that can handle a few more tasks and things like that with respect to maybe operating equipment of different natures and things like that. And again, I go back to Public Works. Keith has done a fantastic job of keeping metrics on these are the tasks or the jobs that I needed to do. And once that bucket is full of, doing as much as you can do, you can't do anymore. So some get left behind. And at that point, he's got a big list of things that he could keep somebody busy for several years catching up with his list. And that's independent of overlays and things like that, if I'm not mistaken, that he's got a whole slew of things that he needs to get caught up with.
However, if Keith put in more overtime, he could catch these projects up. Softball, Keith, sorry.
Just assign it to Cheryl. And then utilities. Utilities, honestly, this kind of scratches the surface of what we need to do to make some adjustments there. There's lots of different other positions that we need. The one thing that Matt Felice, when he was here as our assistant city engineer, he was focused primarily on utility projects. And since Michael Woods was hired as the assistant city engineer, and he has been moved over to the planning and development. That role has gone vacant for quite some time now, even on the engineering side, but Kendall's side has been totally vacant for about 1.5 years now. So it's getting, he's in desperate need of that level of position. He's got multiple levels that are not reflected on this, but these are the more of the entry-level maintenance type positions and operator positions that we need to address and focus immediately. But Kendall's got a lot of them out there. And then we've got other positions. The clerk's office had positions frozen, and that was one of the things that we discovered was that our interpretation of frozen and previous administration's interpretation of frozen were different. We assumed they were frozen. Their interpretation was they were eliminated. So we want to restore some of those positions back to what they were because in the spirit of trying to keep costs down during COVID, all of us were focused on, let's reduce costs as best we can. I'll give her this position up. We'll freeze this position. When in reality, it was just eliminated. So we need those positions, so we're going to put some of those back. And Ben has asked for a position in finance. That's going to be more in the business license area, if I'm not mistaken, to go collect additional revenue for the city. So anything that offsets revenue, I think those are things that need to be a priority, or generates, not offsets. IT had a GIS technician position. This is one of those that, in my opinion, the citizens would love, simply because if you get somebody that's programming our GIS maps and you go out to our website and you click on different links and you can find out, what year Shep was born or something like that. There's lots of information out there through the GIS mapping, and there's more data than the staff that we currently have can effectively and efficiently do. That would be a good addition right there. And then planning and development, we need an office assistant there. They're going to have an influx of process-oriented paperwork, things like that we need to get taken care of, contracts and such. That department has been hit pretty hard itself. We're looking at close to 33% turnover in that department. So it's a small department, but still it's one of those that we need to make sure we keep that up to date as well.
Jan, before you move on the fourth item, the IT, that says that they had originally requested a GIS technician, but after they have met with Ben and the other directors and saw what the needs were citywide, they removed their request for that GIS person, seeing that there's higher needs in other departments. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, I think.
That is very, very complimentary when everybody can work together and one department head sees that there's a higher need in another department to say, you know what, we can hold on this one, let's take care of that one. I just wanted to point that out. That's huge. That's a huge cultural change.
Well, I think the big part is the way Ben has introduced the budgeting process to the department heads. In the past, we brought our requests in individually to the city administrator and to the finance director. We found out 6-8 months later whether or not we got what we wanted, whereas now all the directors are sitting around the same table talking about, hey, this is what I need, that's what I need. How do we do this? How do I do that? That kind of thing. It's kind of collaborative, actually. Yeah. Works well.
That is very, very complimentary, thank you, and healthy.
Okay. The internal equity, this is the one that I kind of want to point out, and that's kind of the magic behind the curtain kind of thing, with respect to how we determined what job was equivalent to another job internally. You know, our classifications, and you'll see this later, they currently start out for the lowest level employee starts out at a 9C. Don't know what the C is for exactly, but it's there. And it goes all the way up to a 40C. That being said, you know, we looked at all the job descriptions of all the employees, of all the different positions that we have, and we evaluated those based on the factors that you see here, the skill level that's required, the training and ability, the experience that's required, the level of work, their human relations skills, physical demands, work conditions, and hazards. So obviously, you know, somebody that in HR, their work conditions and hazard is going to be like a 10 on a score, and a police officer is going to be a, what's that, an 80, 90? Something way up there. So that's what differentiates those kinds of things, so that you get some internal equity for being out, being shot at, things like that, or however you want to characterize it. Independence of actions, impact of end results, and the supervision exercise. So you'll see later, like when it gets to when we reclassify department heads, you'll see that Chief Matthews, for the chief of police, that position has the highest score because their span of control is greater than someone like myself. So obviously, that score is going to be a lot higher from a competitive internal equity kind of perspective. That needs to be scored higher. And then we scored, or we totaled up all of those and then laid that against our current salary scale based on the 9C, 11C, and so on like that. And position people, you know, like if you scored, you know, like if somebody scored at the level of a 32C, we would want to make sure that everybody that was slotted in a 32C had similar scores. So that way we've got that internal equity. Then we looked at the external equity. We had the directors in our last salary study. They gave us the information with respect to the cities and the entities that we leaned on. We've got a number of them in there. And so I won't go through all of those. But we also were able to leverage the Missouri Police Chiefs Association and Missouri Municipal League. I believe it was Grandview, where we got theirs, data from their recent study, and they stretched off into Kansas and other areas where there could be a possibility we could lose staff. We're not currently losing a lot of staff to other municipalities, but the reality is this gives us a benchmark to look at and compare. And then we've got, we compiled all this information, and we've got two different exhibits. We've got Exhibit A, which is the 2022 pay scale and the proposed 2023 pay scale, and then we've got the 2023 and the proposed 2024. Now, I will tell you from the get-go, the 2024 is nebulous. It's out there. You're going to see, it's like you'll ask questions about it. It's one of those things that it's our plan to move forward in that direction, but we will make tweaks along the way. Just wanted you to be aware. And that's it.
Are you going to go through Exhibit A?
Yes.
Oh.
It's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
On your study,
Yeah.
were any of the cities that you used for your data-driven results based, or any of those cities where some of the personnel that we were losing might have been going towards, or?
Every now and then we'll lose folks to Springfield, but not very often. Sometimes we'll lose them to Ozark, but yeah, we incorporated a lot of the surrounding areas and then a lot of the big cities as well. Okay, the one thing I want to point out here is if you look at some of the entry-level positions, like let's look at the office assistant too. The 2022 minimum salary, it's a 9C. Well, the first thing we did is we escalated that to an 11C so that it fits higher up in the scale, but it's still the lowest level position in the scale. But that entry-level position goes from a $30,000 a year to a $34,000 a year. That's based on a comparative analysis that we did with respect to the municipalities, and this also sticks in, we've accounted for a 5% increase for all employees for 2023. Now, our plan for that 5% increase is to, typically what we do is we do something like a 2% cost of living increase, and then on their evaluation date, which in many circumstances is their anniversary date. But if you get promoted, that changes and things like that. So I just say evaluation date. But on their evaluation date, then they could get up to a 3% increase. Now, 12% of our staff gets 3% increase. The rest get somewhere 2.5 to 2.05 increase. And so you've got that delta in between that 2.05, 2.5, and the 3 that's budgeted that in the past we played with. That was kind of loose money that we played with. For 2023, our plan is to forego awarding that possible 3% increase on the anniversary date or on the review date, but go ahead and award it as a cost of living increase on January 1 and do the entire 5% that catches us up with, does a better job of catching us up with the market. And that way, there's no delta in there to play with. The employees get the full amount. There's no, well, only 12% get that full amount and the other 88% get something less. At this point, everybody's going to get the full amount that we've got budgeted.
Before you move on, Finance Department and the Board of Aldermen, do you understand what Jen just said? Because that's a change in the way we've been doing it versus what they're recommending. In the past, there was a rating, a grading, if you will, and that had different percentages. And then you add that to the fixed 2% cost of living to come up with their annual increase. And now that we're talking about foregoing the grading and just having a fixed number across the board equal for everybody.
We still plan to do the grading, the evaluation, but we're not going to tie compensation to that for 2023.
Can I ask you a question? Sure. So we're doing that one time only on January 1, 2023 to get everybody caught up. And then after 2023, will it go back to 2% cost of living increase? And then you'd get up to 3% depending on your annual performance review. Is that correct? Or
we're going to look at that. We've got, for right now, we've made a tentative agreement with the IAFF for compensation for 2023, and then to establish a pay scale for 2024. We haven't ironed it all out yet, but the current methodology that we have is we've got a 21-step pay scale, and it increments by 2.05%. The plan with the fire department is to eliminate the odd number steps, truncate that down to 10 steps, so that the increase is 4.14 per step. So we're going to look at that. We're in that direction for fire. We're going to look at that for police as well, and we're going to look at that possibly for utilities. The other thing that we have in addition to that, and this is one of the things that whenever I developed the pay scales in the past couple of years, the one thing that I was really a big proponent of is establishing elements in the pay scale that says the more you bring to the table, the more we pay. And in that respect, we're looking at ad pay elements for each employee. Utilities currently does it for licensure. If you get a D license, a C license, a B license, whatever, you move up the scale, you get a certain percentage on your paycheck. We want to do that across the board.
Sure.
So that way we incentivize people to go out and bring additional talent to the table, and we reward them for it. It's that simple.
So Jen, before we go through these, let's use that top line, Office Assistant 2, as an example. So today, 2022, the starting pay is 30,000, the max pay is 46.
Right.
Is it a proposal from you and Ben that for starting January 1, the minimum is then 34 and the max is increased to 51?
Yes, sir.
How does that affect the existing employees? If the existing employees are looking at this, are they going to be anticipating an increase based on this?
Yes, sir. They will. Whenever it comes that time, whenever we go through this process, like on an evaluation date, we will, or actually, we're going to do it on January 1. I get my dates mixed up from time to time. But we're going to reslot people on January 1. A number of people are going to increase in their pay grade. They're going to go up a proportional amount at that point. Ben was, he and I had a conversation several weeks ago to set aside a pool of funds to accommodate that, a specific pool of funds.
A couple other questions. So that Office Assistant 1, if there's any employees in the city right now that are at minimum salary of 30,000, on January 1, they're going to get, whatever that math is, a 12% increase in pay.
Yeah. Right. So down, if you cascade down that pay scale, somebody's going to be in the middle of that pay scale.
Sure.
And so they will move up proportionally in the new.
Same percentage?
Well, not the same percentage, a proportional percentage.
Proportional,
Based
okay.
on the number of steps that they increase that they got.
And this is in addition to the cost of living or anything else we're talking about? This is just a base pay increase?
Right. Yeah.
Jan, I got a question. If, in the current range, if somebody's been here, say, 10 years, I don't know, I'll pick one, plant operator trainee, no, that's not a good example. Some of these, the minimum pay jumps up pretty close to what the max pay is currently. So say somebody's been here for a number of years, they've gotten these raises, they've moved up based on merit. Under the new pay scale, and let's say they're still in the range, that same range, they're going to stay around their same pay. Somebody coming in new would theoretically be hired with fresh off the street at that same pay under some of these numbers I'm looking at. I'm trying to find an example I can give you.
Animal control versus planner.
Yeah, so there you go. So top end for animal control is 47,520. So let's say they've been here 10 years and they're around 44. Well, the entry level pay, the proposed entry level pay is basically 44. So is there going to be any factoring in of that? If somebody's been here for a number of years, they've gotten the merit pays, but this new pay scale basically puts them at the bottom end of the new. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
I think I do. If your question is if I'm close to the top end of the pay scale, so understand that under normal circumstances, if you've been here 10 years, you're going to be somewhere in dead center of the pay scale.
Sure.
So in that respect, if you are moved up, let's say from a 14C to a 17C, that each step is roughly, is 3%. We would move you up for each step, that 3% then at that point. So that offsets that. Now, if your question is more along the lines of, I'm a 17C now and I'm a 17C later, and I'm in the middle of the pay scale, and I hire an animal control, or if an animal control officer gets moved 3 steps, that's just the nature of the internal equity of that position that we've evaluated. So that means that the new position, as the person gets reslotted, that position becomes a little more valuable than whatever the comparator is.
So let me see if I can rephrase what I think Cody was asking. Let's stay with that animal control officer example. So let's say the mid-pay range is $40,000, just to use numbers. On January 1, generally speaking, would they then be in the mid-range of the proposed salary pay range for '23?
Roughly,
Roughly, yeah. So
I don't
Cody,
know
in
the
that
math.
example, they would be, if they were getting 40 today, looking over at the 23, they would be 50.
Okay, and that was my question. I was just wanting to make sure it was a proportional
Yeah.
within the new pay scale versus, 43 is the new base, but that's more than what they made. We're not going to just stop them at 43. They're going to move up.
No.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get
Yeah.
clarification on. Thank you.
Like whenever we do like out-of-class pay, typically, let's say if we were going to move, if I am a maintenance tech, or a maintenance technician, I'm at 11C, and I want to move, or I need to move into, on a temporary basis, a 14C as a lead maintenance tech. At that point, if I'm working out of class temporarily, I move to the bottom of the pay scale. But that's it. If I then get promoted, then it would then be whatever the amount is proportional to my current pay.
But in that same example, if you were at an 11C and you were getting 32 and you moved to a 14C and today you would be bumped to 35, on January 1st, you would go to 38.5.
Right.
Yeah.
You could get a fairly significant change in pay.
So I thought that's how I was reading this last night. And so I see this as bad news and good news. The bad news is for all city employees, almost every city employee, the pay that you've been received after this study, and Jen, I can't thank you enough for the amount of work your own division did to do this staffing study. I just can't imagine the amount of hours put into this. But the value to our employees is after your work on January 1st, they're going to, was it this year that everybody got the 7 and 5%?
Yeah, 7%.
So everybody this year got a 7%. On January 1st, when this goes into effect, almost everybody is going to receive a base pay bump.
Everybody will see 5%. Some people will see more than that.
Jan? Mayor, are you
Yes.
done? So I want to make sure I understand this correctly. Every year, no matter what, everybody gets a 2% cost of living raise,
Not every year. That's
if approved by the board.
in 2020 and 2021, I don't believe we did.
Well, those were
Due to-
exceptional COVID years.
due to-
but
Right.
Normal
But
years.
the norm
Ex-
is, so I guess the issue I have with that is if you took away the 2% without it being tied to anything, right? But rewarded more with that 2% you're saving, made that into a scale based on evaluation score, you're rewarding your top performers. You're giving your instead of it being, well, all I have to do is barely show up to work, I can miss work, I can not do my job, I'm gonna at least, if I can just barely hang on, I'm gonna get a 2% raise. But the guy up here is gonna get the 2%. Can we not adjust that to say, if you want to raise, you need to be at least at a, I don't know if our evaluations are like most, where it's like a 1 to 5, 3 being you're doing what you need to do, 4 is exceeding, and 5 is greatly exceeding. A lot of companies do that. So if you're at a 2, I'm sorry, you're not getting a raise because you're not performing. We don't care what cost of living is. You're costing us money being here. Increase your performance, and you can get an increase. So they still get the 2%, but they have to be the 3 or higher. So if the average increase is 3% for everybody, it bumps to 5%. So you're not taking it away from them, but it becomes a scale based on their performance evaluation to incentivize the city, the employees, to work harder for their bosses. Thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. When I got here in 2014, the first thing I saw is our compensation was way behind. And we incorporated something like that, where we had a 2% cost of living, and that adjustable merit part was all the way up to 5%. And that, it helped move salaries up. It got cut, pure and simple. And that's just kind of what we'd been living with for a while. Now for 2023, we're just living off of the 5% that Ben said. We've got this kind of built in, but then with all the other changes that we're going to make, people are going to see some significant changes across the board. For 2023, it's not going to be so much based on merit, but I go back to the premise. We haven't designed everything out yet for 2024. We just wanted to kind of get caught up for 23.
And I think this is important because I do believe the city, obviously, based on your study, is behind in salaries. And so I think getting to that point is important. I just think during this budget process that it's important to think about, and Ben, you guys and your team are doing a phenomenal job with leading us, not just today and tomorrow, but future expectations and being conservative with that. But this is important in the years that I've been on Finance Committee and Aldermen is work comp issues and issues of a variety of issues with staffing. We have an amazing staff. Let's reward the ones that work hard, that show up, that make these directors' lives easier by going above and beyond. They're going to get the higher evaluation score and therefore the higher pay increase. It just makes sense to me. And your ones at the bottom can jump up or jump off. That's normal business.
I couldn't agree more. That's one of those where I think at the end of the day, we're going to have to do a lot more supervisor training on how to enforce those kind of standards, though. That becomes the big challenge of, I've got this person over here, and, in the past we took into consideration family matters and things like that. I get that. You have to be sensitive to a lot of different things, but in a lot of respects, you got to be focused heavily on performance. And like I said, I couldn't agree more. Effectively, though, for 2023, we're looking at significant transitions that we just felt like, with 8% inflation and things like that, combined with all the withheld promises in the past years, we want to make sure that we see a significant impact for all positions.
So I think what you're saying, Betsy, is you agree with getting caught up, but once we're there, let's reward them. I mean, because, let's say I have 2 box office employees, and one goes out of the way to answer all the calls, and the other one lets it ring and go to voicemail, or let the other person get it. And while they're in downtime, they're doing faxes or going out of their way to keep busy. And I mean, you want to reward the one that's going above and beyond. And I get that and agree with that.
Right. I think you won't get a whole lot of argument with that.
Yeah, I think planning for that, those increases, it's not, to the staff, it's not taking away the 2%. It's building it into a merit-based system. So if you want it, you're going to earn it by simply getting a 3 or better on your evaluation. The better you do on your evaluation, the more money you can make. And I just think we need to build that into future planning.
Actually, this will be the first year we really haven't done it that way.
And Ben, just, again, just to clarify, the numbers you presented earlier included all of the department's new hires and all of these increases across the board for everybody.
I know, for the sake of time, I think the conversation's exactly where we need to go. But this would be one I'd put on a parking lot and bring back, because we have opportunities. You know what I said at the opening? We have an opportunity to put aside money, right, at the end of this year, not just for capital, but for people too.
Yep.
So what we're suggesting in this budget is push forward with 5% because of inflation. It's not going to hit it all, but it's going to do a dent, right? And then bring back a plan to set aside a little bit and maybe even do something like a merit pool. I've done that before, but, and that's not a bad idea that you had. But just for the sake of time, I think that's a good idea. This is one way I put on a parking lot and bring it back to you guys.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, because we've got other issues to deal with along that same line, and that is standardizing our evaluation process. You know, we've got a standard evaluation process right now, but it's been implemented very differently across different departments. And that's the part that we need to iron out too.
Yep. And I want to remind everybody that all this information that we've seen, including all of this detail, this is just half of one page of several. But all this information is available online for anybody.
And that was the thing, you know, we'd sent these kinds of things down to have included in our budget book since 2018. And they've been eliminated through that process. So we want to make sure that moving forward, that anytime we make additions to our pay structure or modifications to our pay structure, or add positions even, we want to bring it back to the board for approval, because that's the one thing that, you know, when we incorporated the customer liaison position, in the past, we would have just, there would have been, okay, just go fill this job. We brought it to the board for approval, and we want to keep doing that.
Are we announcing that he's been hired here pretty soon? I just found out when I was wearing my fireman hat last night. Do you know he's been hired?
Okay. Chad, if you would, bring up the other one. Oh, unless you have a question.
I just wanted to go to, I know that according to our police chief, we were needing some sergeants. Would you find the police sergeant? So today, the starting police sergeant gets $57,000 a year.
Okay.
On January 1st, a police sergeant gets $67,000 a year.
That's right. And we typically, as a rule of thumb, do not hire police sergeants from the outside.
No, but we have the opportunity if we hired a lateral. But I thought that was a good example of what'll help us retain and recruit additional officers.
Jan, do you know how competitive that is with Ozark and Springfield?
It's very competitive.
Very competitive? Right there with them, or are we above them?
It's above them.
Good deal.
That's exciting.
One other point of order on these, when you look at on that left side there where you've got the position titles there, anything that's bold is an exempt position. Anything that's not bold is a non-exempt or an hourly paid position, just so you know.
Why is 35C so much less than the others? As under the new pay scale, it goes from the 60s, 70s, it drops down to 51. Is there a?
That's
Probably
just a
61.
clerical error.
Which classification are you on, Cody?
Was
The
it 71?
35C
Oh,
is
it's
there.
35C.
35C.
That'd be 71?
Yeah. it's just a clerical error. We'll fix it. Thank you for pointing that out.
Oh,
Yeah, that wouldn't make sense.
good catch. Good
To
catch.
see that.
Okay, sorry for interrupting, Jan. Go ahead.
That's okay. Chad, if you would bring up the other one. And this one, if you will, the pay grades that you see for 2024, again, I want to stress that those are estimates at this point, based on no further information or anything at this point. Simply what these are the starting points and the ending points of comparative municipalities based on 25% of the standard deviation above the midpoint of all of those municipalities. So as part of what Human Resources wants to do, we want to incorporate a new applicant tracking platform for taking applications, one that also allows us to pull data from other municipalities. It's the largest vendor out there. Most municipalities deal with this particular vendor, and we want to use that to be able to pull that statistical salary data, and then we can update this on a regular basis.
Okay, but you do realize almost every one of those, their max salary in '23 reduces in '24.
This is strictly statistical. That's all it is.
Whoa, I'd throw that page in the trash.
Well, it's just, the point of this is just, we took a comparison of the entry level and the maximum of all municipalities. So what this means is,
If you hang on to the city long enough to make it to 2024, we're going to reduce your pay. I read it as I see them.
no, sir.
I think what he's saying, Larry, is statistically, on the 2024 max, that's where you would be if you didn't work for the city.
Very good. If you were one
Ding,
of
ding,
those,
ding, ding, what do I win?
a free Diet Coke.
You can get chicken fingers at the paddle wheel. Okay,
Anyhow, I have spoken a long time here. I apologize for taking, so, unless there's any more questions, I will turn this over to Ben.
Go ahead and pull Kendall's up, if you would, 'cause I think he's next. So the parking lot we've got to bring back to you guys is the potential for a merit pool, so we can implement something like that along with HR, the way that was described. So we'll do that. If there's anything else, I think.
I was just, there's no urgency on this. In fact, you can wait till after budget season. But
Absolutely.
I'd be curious to see our state statute says we need a 20% reserve. We've chosen to go with 30% to be conservative. I'd like to see maybe 5 years or so of how those funds have done to get, just to establish a history. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'll try to be brief as I can, but hopefully be effective in the presentation here. Again, so year to year, Utilities brings a presentation to discuss water and sewer rates. So we're going to talk about topics of our water and sewer capitals. Jan has touched a lot on the staffing and salary study, and then we got projected water revenues and expenses, and then our projected sewer revenues and expenses as well, plus talk about rates. Let's see if I can get this to work. Oops, wrong button. Hold on. There we go. All right, so just a quick rundown. I wanted to refamiliarize you all with our utility system, because I think it's important, because utilities has a numerous number of assets. We have great responsibilities. We have our 2 water treatment plants, 2 wastewater treatment plants. We got 7 groundwater wells, 38 lift stations, public lift stations, and 8 water towers, over 100+ miles of water line, and 200+ miles of sewer lines. We have well over 5,000 manholes. We also have well over 3,000 valves, water valves, and then over 950 fire hydrants. And then we also take care of backflow and cross-connection program, which keeps our drinking water safe. And then also fats, oil, and grease. And then our capital projects we manage, as well as construction of those projects in conjunction with Public Works and Engineering Department. So I want to quickly just highlight our water capitals that we proposed for our 5-year plan for tourism dollars. So just a quick breakdown. What we do is this model is based off of life cycles. So, and also our projects, we span out a 20-year model. So this is just a snapshot of the next 5 years. We didn't want to overwhelm you with the 20-year plan, because when you get to looking at that, it can get, when you get past 5 years, things could change a little bit as you're going through. So I didn't want to throw too much at you at one time. But again, we, in our model, we also include tourism projects, but the tourism projects does not affect the water sewer rates. And also with that, our life cycles, when we get into the rate capital, it's based off of, for example, like our lift station pumps. We do a life cycle of, for our high flow pumps, replacement or rebuild every 5 years. And that's due to the conditions that they are faced with. You know, you're pumping dirty water and they go through extreme conditions. And then our normal flow lift stations are replaced every 7 years, or rebuilt every 7 years. And then usually with about a 20-year rebuild or 20-year replacement. But we can get usually 2 or 3 rebuilds within that time period. And then like our drinking water pumps, they typically last 12 to 15 years before rebuilds. So it's clean water. They're not as strained on the conditions. So, and then our vehicles, again, we have our typical 10-year cycle, but then we also take into account the Public Works' maintenance scoring system as well. And then we have our lease program in there as well. We do got some leased vehicles. So this slide, again, it talks about our tourism capital. We've got for 2023, so you can see the 2023 column is highlighted in blue. We've got in conjunction with Keith Francis and his goals with the Highway 76 construction. We got the $4.3 million in there for water mains alone. Now, I think Keith has recently said that may be pushed more to 2024, but I'll let him speak to that later on in his presentation. But again, he'll have some downtown water main stuff or downtown projects in there. But one thing I'd like to highlight, the neighborhoods construction. So I've got in 2023, we have $3.3 million in there. And in 2024, will be another $3.3 million. So that's designated towards Hiawatha Heights subdivision. So that's our first subdivision that we want to do a complete water main replacement, and that includes water services as well. So what that will also help us in is not only reducing, hopefully significantly reducing the water leaks, but also help with fire flow. We've got one project going on right now in the Hiawatha Heights area, which First Baptist Church. I think they're struggling with fire flow at the moment for one of their projects. But again, this will help with that, and then also with some federal mandates coming down with the lead and copper rules. So,
Ken, on those neighborhood water lines, how much has been budgeted in previous years to replace those?
none.
So this is that's what I thought.
Well, let me back up and say that, so for 2022, we did budget $560,000 for design work for next year.
But this is new, to be putting in $3+ million to replace the water lines in our neighborhoods that you presented to us a while ago.
Yes, that is correct.
And to mitigate the water lines breaking, right?
Yeah, so as you know, you've seen our media releases and communications that we've had, an uptick in water main breaks.
Yes.
We had to start somewhere, to be open about it. Actually, the subdivision that is showing significantly greater amount of leaks is actually like Parnell, Iserman, and Lakewood Estates area. However, we chose to postpone that subdivision because of our Compton Drive flood protection project. We didn't want the construction of both those projects going on at one time and significantly impacting the residences down there. They're already going to see some impact with the Compton Drive construction, but so we're trying to stagger those two projects. So we moved to our next on the list, which is Hiawatha Heights, and then Lakewood and Parnell and Iserman would come in 2025. So what you see that the next line, or excuse me, you will see the next in 2024, we plugged in the 480,000, and that'd be the design work for the 2025 $4.8 million project of that subdivision.
Thank you.
To stagger the design and stagger the construction. Again, these are all tourism funds. And then here's our sewer capital for tourism funds. Again, we've got significant lift station rebuilds and replacements, upgrades. These projects like lift station 10 and 34 have currently been designed. They've been sitting on the shelf since 2019, waiting on funding. And we also have our typical, so we did plug in money in there for Compton Drive, wastewater flood protection of $2.25 million. Just to note that's on top of the $13 million that we have in grant funding. Now that was due to the latest estimate that we had from our engineer. It was come out at $5.2 million, which included also a generator installation, a couple generators to keep the plant going if it did become flooded. If we did have to use the flood wall, we're going to need generators to keep the plant going, because generally when those flood waters come up, the electricity gets shut off. So we've got to be able to keep the plant running, right? We can protect it from the flood, but it's going to engulf itself in wastewater if we don't keep those pumps and motors running. So again, that 2.2 million, again, that's contingent upon the bidding that hopefully goes out here later this year. The numbers are looking a little better, so we're hoping that we've done some value engineering as well, and as we bring the project before you guys, we'll hopefully narrow that down to where we don't have to use so much tourism dollars.
So just to say that another way, the Compton sewer treatment plant is going to cost us $15.2 million. We've generated $13 million in grants, right? So that just represents the difference. And depending on the cost estimates, that figure will go up or down because we're covering the distance, or the difference, yeah.
And we did try to seek out additional grant funding, but we ran into some roadblocks there with that. One, due to the scope of work that was originally submitted for the grant. It would take a significant process to go back through and try to revise that scope of work. And then also the kind of the indication we got from the CDBG folks was the city needs to put some skin into the game, basically, simple terms, because we've got so much money.
That's kind of fair.
So.
Right, got to put something in.
Yeah. All right, so now we're getting into the water capitals that's.
Kendall, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I couldn't get the microphone fast
Okay.
enough. Do we get a sewer sales tax reimbursement from the county on any of our projects?
Okay, so good question. So last board meeting, I brought before the board a resolution for projects. So we are actually going to submit, we actually put a request into the county. We had to have it in by September 30th. So we, by request of the board, we brought a resolution to them for our projects. That's the projects that we included in that sewer sales tax request was for lift station 10, lift station 34, also what you'll see in the rate side here in a minute is the wastewater conveyance study. And then also we had a lift station 46. So it's in total combined, I think it was close to $2.6 million that we're going to request from the county in sewer sales tax.
Okay, thank you.
Historically, we won't get that much. We I'm hoping for at least $1 million. But again, we'll know more as the county does their budget later on down the road.
In case they're listening, tell them we're expecting the full 2 million.
I've had some good conversations with Brad Albritton over there, so.
Now, were any of these projects carried over from our budget from last year?
Okay, so good question. Lift Station 34 is a carryover from last year, from this year, from 2022. That 320,000 is actually in addition to the money we budgeted for 2022. So we budgeted 480,000, and so that 320 would kick it up to the 800,000 mark, which is similar to Lift Station 10. Both those projects are very similar in nature, and also that's also based on a recent bid that we received for Lift Station 46, which is another lift station that's similar in nature itself. So one thing, a little plug to put in there as well, Lift Station 10, we actually had a catastrophic failure at that lift station this last 2 weeks. We lost a pump, it scattered itself, and then the other pump sucked up a rock and blew a hole in the side of it. So it's currently in limp mode right now. We're in the process of getting prices. Now this is, the lift station upgrade is to convert the station from a 4-pump system to a 2-pump system. Right now it has 2 pumps in the wet well and 2 pumps in a dry well. It's kind of a booster pump type setup. It's not very energy efficient. So in that upper pump, that if it's not to shut off appropriately or just to run, it has no way to cool itself, so it'll burn up. So the intent is to go submersibles with some variable frequency drives that ramp the pumps up. It basically starts at a slower rate and kicks it into high gear if needed, so it can also save us some electricity there as well. So it's a good significant upgrade. Well, obviously we don't want to spend a ton of money on replacing the original style pumps when next year we want to update this, right? So I just had a conversation, or Stephanie had a conversation with me about an hour ago that we're looking at what we can do internally to change some controls around to be able to accommodate for the new style pump, to try to save us money in the future, try to go ahead and do an upgrade.
So I know last year when we were going through this process because of coming out of 2020, 2021, and it was extremely difficult to get any of the parts or anything that you needed. There was such a backlog, and then the prices increased. Are you seeing that level out now? Is it easier to get stuff so it's still, so like if you need it today, you might be lucky if you could get it 6 months from now? Is that, and it's not going to be the price 6 months from now that it is today, correct?
Let's just say it could be 6 to 12 months.
6 to 12 months.
More like 12 months on some things.
So we're kind of forced to limp through this just because it's going to take a while to get the replacement.
And that's why when you, in water and wastewater industry, they build redundancy into the treatment plant process or in the lift station process, right? You have 2 pumps, they alternate, keep flows moving, and if one fails, the other pump has to be able to keep up with normal flows, right? Well, that gives you time to order new pumps or whatever it may be. Well, what we're seeing though is if that is stretched out to like a year period, it puts us in a bind. So it gives the wastewater guys some anxiety a little bit, some little loss of sleep. They have to have contingency plans in place. We have to have emergency pumps, diesel pumps on hand, and to be able to roll in and set up a emergency system to take care of the flows if needed. So.
All the more importance to replace needed equipment in a timely manner instead
That is correct.
of putting
Yes.
it off, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so. Got to stay up on those life cycles.
So Kendall, these pumps that we're talking about that take 6 to 12 months to come in and you have a catastrophic failure, are they priced so high that we would not be able to have one on hand, and then when we put that in service, use the time to replace it?
So each pump, so we do have some pumps that are similar in nature to other components, but most of these pumps are one-offs. They're tailored exactly, they're engineered for, let me use the correct terms, they're engineered for the specific station, right? So they have certain types of impellers that are cut into it, and they've got a certain cut to them that pumps a certain GPM based off of head conditions.
Sure.
So it's hard to say, let's go buy a spare pump to have on hand that could be used for multiple lift stations.
Got it.
It's really just for that particular lift station only. So that'd get very costly if we did that. Would it help us out? Oh, yeah, definitely so. It'd give us a peace of mind, but it would, hopefully the industry will turn around and supplies will start
Some
becoming.
standardization, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I want to highlight the green is our small capital such as pumps and components that are for replacement. The blue is more of vehicles and equipment such as like excavators, flushing machines, things of that nature. These are all funded out of rates, so you can see in 2023 for the water capitals and what I need to point out to you, I've got a little bit of discrepancy on the bottom line of the green there where the totals are, or excuse me, the bottom line on the very bottom of the slide. The 2023 number is correct as far as the total, but if you go to add up all those blue, you'll notice they're short. We're missing a line item in the green section, and that's our annual water tower maintenance. So we had when we was trying to save the slide, we lost some data in there. So it is, rest assured, it is in the rate model that we use. That's all trued up. It's just a transfer error over to the presentation. So the 2023 number at the very bottom, the total, the 1,014,550 is correct. The next 3 years are incorrect, but the 2027 number is correct as well. So, and again, when we get into the other parts, some slides down the road, you'll see that all those numbers have been corrected. But one thing I want to point out is significant changes has been, I wanted me to limit to is our water tower replacement program. And then our water master plan update. So that water master plan update will help give us a better or an updated roadmap to where we need to go with our utility for future capital needs. So sewer, obviously sewers, we couldn't fit it all on one slide, so we separated it out. We got a lot of components in it, and also a touch base is you see in the 5-year plan, in the next 5 years, those numbers are scattered out, and that's due to the life cycles. That's us trying to balance out rates. We've tried to look at the end number from year to year, what we were spending in capital for rates. And the ideal, and I'll show you in another slide here, is try to balance that out to help rates balance out so you don't have such sharp inclines. So big thing for sewer is, again, our lift station rebuild and replacement program. There's a lot of dollars going towards that. And then also we have a big ticket item there is our wastewater conveyance study update, and that's $500,000 that I plugged into, and to help do some hydraulic modeling and help, again, the last time we did an update on the conveyance study was back in 2007. So we're about 15 years out. I think it's time for another roadmap to be updated. So here's the vehicle and equipment replacements. Okay, I want to touch base real quick, throw a plug in here for personnel, and Jan touched a lot on the staffing study, but I want to just go to bat one more time here for utility staff. I think I owe it to my most valuable resource that I have, and that is my staff. And I want to also say that the verbiage I got here is not only based off of COVID and where inflation has went and the competitive wages that's out there, not only just retail, but I mean even in our industry itself, where you got private water companies, sewer companies, and things we're competing with as well, besides municipalities. But it's been an ongoing for probably the last 10 years. We have seen a downward trend of interest in the water and wastewater world. You go to water wastewater classes to upkeep your continuing education, and that is a common topic with instructors, is that most of the people that you see around the table are folks that's been there 15, 20 years. And similar to the electrical industry as well, they're going to have a lot of folks that's going to retire. So that's what we're faced with, and this is across the nation. This is not just Branson deal. This is across the nation that the water and sewer industry is struggling to attract attention to the workforce and to that career line. And a lot of it, it's not very glorified work. It is rewarding work. I'll just tell you, for my 22 years, I've stuck it out because it's very rewarding. But again, it's not a glorious line of work that attracts people. And so I think we need to really focus on those competitive wages and becoming a leader in the industry to change our approach and to focus on that recruitment. But a big thing, that hurts us the most is that high turnover rates. They're expensive. It's time consuming. It's time consuming for my office staff to have to go out through the hiring process. It's time consuming for field staff to have to continually train somebody. And it takes about 3 years to get somebody well established where they start becoming more efficient and to a point to where we can send them out on their own to do things and feel confident that they're not going to mess something up in the system and cause a water main break or whatever. You can turn the wrong valve at the wrong time or turn it too fast, and you can cause a lot of headaches and disruption for the economics of Branson. And so we want to make sure we put good qualified people in there that are well trained and keep those folks. So.
I also discovered as I was reading through this that Utilities Department represents about 20% of all Branson employees, 20 or 25%, which is a significant number.
Yeah, we have 51 employees.
Yeah, so that's roughly 20% of all, right? And so with what you're saying, and especially when I looked at how many positions you're needing to fill today, have you had an opportunity to look at these salary increases beginning January 1?
I have.
And your thoughts are?
Okay. I looked at what Kimberly and Jan has brought before you guys.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sound foundation to it. There's a lot of good there. I've already talked to Jan a little bit. I've got some flags that got thrown up with me. I've got some positions that aren't going to get any pay increases whatsoever, besides the normal 5%. I'm calling it the normal 5% that we have generally we have the opportunity for. Sometimes 3% because of the COLA's not included, for the year.
Right.
But for salary adjustments, I've got some crew leaders and that are not shown to be increased. And reason why it throws a flag for me is because in 2018, we did do a restructure in utilities, and we worked really hard at trying to look at those classifications and the duties that they're responsible for. And part of those, other positions, we had those crew leaders similar to our water and wastewater treatment lead operators. Very similar in nature. They lead the folks below them. They help train those folks. The supervisors and the managers heavily lean on those crew leaders or those lead operators to keep things rolling. And the treatment plant people got bumped up, but the crew leaders for water distribution, sewer collection did not. So that's something that I'll be, going to bat for them in future conversations. Again, Jen and his team worked really hard, and we're kind of up against some deadlines here to go through this. So you'll see in my other slides, with utilities being a little unique, and we set rates based off the need and demands, I've plugged some money in there for some adjustments. That's something that I can dive into here a little bit more. But for what they provided, they had a good sound foundation. 100% agree with their approach and where they're going with this.
Sure. But I just wanted to bring that up because of what you do and how dependent the city is. Let's not get to this point and end up with not satisfying that need we have. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's okay. I appreciate the questions. Okay, so dive into what all this capital means. And what you haven't seen is our operations. I didn't want to throw the operations side of it, but the numbers in here, what it takes for us to run for the year. But so this is the water revenue and expenses sheet, a snapshot off of our model. So if you look at the top line, it starts with water revenues and expenses. The actual revenues, we have 2020, this is just for the water. We have 2020 in there, 2021. The 2022 number is what we had numbers are actual as far as July 31st. Obviously that number's changed since this slide was created. But again, the trend is we're looking very positive. We're projecting the 3.7, almost $3.8 million for 2022 on the revenue. So what we did for 2023 is we kept it flat. We kept it flat for 2023 as projected revenues for water. And then from 2024 and on up, we had an increase of 0.5% is what we typically do for our model. As far as operations and maintenance, you can see the actual expenses there, what we're projecting for 2022, and then what we're projecting for what we're asking for 2023. And that, keep in mind, it went from 3.1 million to 3.6 million. And a lot of that too is the some of our capital. We changed philosophy in our capital a little bit, where anything less than 25,000 will show in this number instead of the $1,014,000 number that's at the bottom of the page. So we just moved some things around a little bit. That's why that number has jumped up in percentage so much. So we put capital, anything $25,000 or less, under 25,000 into our operations and maintenance budget. So when you look down through there, though, you'll see I plugged in 250,000 for existing salary adjustments, and then I plugged in some staffing. So what I did is I took my total staff that I presented, and I spread it out between a 3-year period of phasing, because I knew we couldn't do it all at once. It'd be not only challenging to get that many people in here, but just challenging on our staff to work through the process of trying to accumulate those folks. So what we focused on for water and for 2023 is let me back up and say what we focused on for 2023 is some water staff. And that is a couple of utility worker ones and an equipment operator. And these are all in the water distribution meter maintenance division. And the reason why we focused there on those was because back in 2020, the state of Missouri passed a Water Safety Act. And part of that Water Safety Act was that utilities must maintain a valve exercising program. They must maintain a hydrant exercise program. They must map their water system. So GIS is important. So I'm going to put a plug in here for Chad and his. Like I said, I commend Chad for pulling back his GIS tech. But I'm going to put a plug in here that utilities is a significant user of GIS. If you can imagine, we have I want to say thousands and thousands of assets out there, right? We try to capture as many things we can on the system. Every valve, every pipe joint, every time we dig up the water main, we don't have information on old stuff, so we shoot a GPS point. That all has to be monitored, processed, and created into a product that we can use by Chad's staff. And we have the abilities to, we have a funding source here that could fund that position. Because again, we fund other positions such as SCADA, one of IT's positions that Matt Gregory focuses solely on, or mainly focuses on the utilities group with our SCADA product and also with our IT needs. We plug money in there for part of Keith's folks for project management. So again, we know we're a significant user and we want to pull our fair share with the water and sewer rates. So that is an option just to throw out there. But again, these 3 water positions will help us reach our goals, or actually not really goals, there are regulatory requirements with these valves, with these fire hydrants. So for example, the fire hydrants were only able to capture an annual inspection of 200 to 300 a year versus the 950 plus that we're supposed to be capturing. Valves, we're about 2% of valves are being exercised versus the 10% we should be meeting. So just to give you an idea of where we're at with the backlog of stuff. So, and again, you guys, the board.
What happens if you're out of regulatory compliance on that? Is that a fine to the city? Is that an additional cost, or?
It's not a fine, immediate fine. So what they do is they come and do a sanitary survey of the system. So they come in, do a check of the water treatment plants. They ask for records. We have to provide them records of our cross-connection control program, backflow. They will come in and say, I need this address. Most of the time they're asking for addresses out of our water district, but we have to kind of hone them back in and say, here's the addresses we have. And so we have to show that we're adequately meeting the regulatory requirements. And part of this, if they was to walk in, all we could show them is that we're making efforts. We're not meeting the requirement, but we're making efforts. Now, generally, it puts just a black mark on us. Now, if it's repeated, I'd say at some point in time they could implement something. We've never had that happen to us, but it's a black mark on us.
Kendall, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. Could you clarify, Kendall, you and I have had a really great conversation the other day. In your position requests and in the budget, Ben, if you can just clarify for me, both of you, we talked about your engineer needs, your plan reviewer needs, number one, and number two was the assistant director, because I don't know how you're able to not be working 100 hours a week based on some of the things you were telling me you've been doing for so long. I wanted to make sure, because you've been very gracious and very generous about offering to pay for a GIS position, which is terrific collaboration and cooperation, but I want to make sure you're not doing that, cutting off your nose to spite your face, so to speak.
Oh, certainly so. And so just to back up and give a little bit of context to that, before Mike Ray retired, and actually before, as Jan had put a nice plug in there for me, before Matt Felice retired, Matt was, our assistant engineer was located in our office up at the water tower. Matt was a significant position for us because we have, as you see, we have lots and lots of capital that we deal with on a regular basis. And having that person in-house that has the engineering background and expertise ready at our fingers to help work close hand in hand with us, it was very beneficial. And when Matt retired, Mike Ray and myself, I just back up and say we had a three-person team to handle our capital, and that was Mike Ray, myself, and Matt Fleece, amongst all the other supporting staff that handled the back end, the paperwork, the contracts, and all that kind of thing. But again, we had all three of us, and then Matt fell off with retirement, and then we struggled to attract a new assistant city engineer in here. We managed to get Michael Woods. Michael kind of barely cutting his teeth with us, and then he got moved to the at that time was the community development department, but now planning department. And Keith needs Michael. Keith has a significant load himself, and originally we talked about, and actually utilities pays 50% of Michael's salary, and that was an effort to share Michael. And in all fairness, and just to be upfront, it's really Keith needs Michael's 100% time for the amount of projects that he has, for the work that he has. He needs his deputy to back him up when things, as things go on. And again, for me, and when Mike retired, it all fell on myself, and that trickled down to my team. I want to say I've been bobbing up and down in the water. It's a lot of hours dedicated to the city of Branson, but it's definitely wearing on myself. It's wearing on my support staff, Stephanie, Crawford is my office specialist, and she's picked up a lot of the slack, a lot of the leftover work, and she has worked, she's one of those that works 60 to 80 hours a week just to help us keep up, and it's been challenging. Sorry,
So
it's-
are the positions in, and
Yes.
thank you for sharing that.
Yes,
And
I've
that-
got the, as you see, the infrastructure specialist. I gave it a different name because I was trying to steer away from assistant engineer.
Okay.
But trying to keep up with the world and the name changes that's out there for positions, but it can change to whatever name we make it. But yeah, I've plugged money in there for our own assistant engineer to help us with our capital projects.
Okay, very good.
And we,
then-
in our current budget, operating budget, we still have in there our assistant director position, so.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, one more thing if I may, and then
You
I'll
bet.
be quiet again. I just want to say this particular case study with utilities is a really good example of the FTE conversations that we do need to be having going forward. I come from that world of full-time equivalent calculations and understanding what your workload is of your staff, and then understanding how many bodies it takes to carry out that work. And we've got people, all over the city, but this was a glaring example to me of one person that's doing the work of 1 3/4 staff, which is really how it should be budgeted for and allowed for. We don't always have that luxury, but when we can identify where those critical needs are, it's very, very helpful for me and for you all to make the decisions based on the recommendations. And I will tell you, these guys, they don't cry wolf. I have just been blown away by the sacrifice everybody's been willing to make for so long. And I appreciate their guidance and wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jan, you'll make a note of that, right? Because I do hear some of these guys putting in crazy hours. They're doing it because of their dedication. But this is the time to address that. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the third line up from the bottom, the water rate funded capital improvements, this is where I mentioned earlier that these are the correct numbers from 2023 to 2027. So it starts off at the $1,014,000 and goes to the $1,040,000. So you can see there that we try to maintain a pretty close equivalency across those years. And that's what that's going to do, is help balance those rates out so we don't have such huge spikes and huge lows through that. So what this all mean is I'm going to skip the sewer and go to the water rates, and I'll backflip to the sewer here in a minute. So this is where the rubber meets the road. How do we fund all this? And so if you look at the water rate, if you look at 2023, you're going to see a 12% increase. If you look at 24, 25, 26, 27, that's getting way out there, but that's kind of how it's laying out, is 10, 10, 10, and 5% increases. And take into fact, it is the salary adjustments, it is the new positions, and it is the water tower maintenance that we previously haven't had in there before. Those are big contributing factors that's kicked this up there. If you look down through the numbers, we take into account what we carried over from our 2021 funds. So our available cash on the water side is the $2.6 million. That's all incorporated into the calculation here of the rates. I've also in the capital side of things, we had, let me back up a slide here. So if you look on our the blue line, the blue highlighted area, so we had some reserve cash in our 146 account. So we had, I could safely say, $900,000 in that reserve that's just sitting there. So I wanted to do is put it to use. And so what I did is I spread that $900,000 out. The water side's hurting a little worse than the sewer. So I designated it $450,000 for 2023 to help offset the cost of capital, to help soften the rate increase. Without that, you're looking more around a 15 to 16% increase by doing that. So we've saved a little bit of rate increase by doing that, and then, like I said, I'll plug the other $450,000 into 2024, depending upon how the numbers come out at the end of the year. Again, this is a revolving process that we do every year, so that we take a look at those numbers. So what's that equate to dollars? 12% sounds like a lot. So we'll dive into those dollars more, but just a quick snapshot here is, for example, your monthly base rates are listed in the blue. To the left of there is the black that's what 2022 is. So you can look at the normal house size meter going from base rate of $10.51 to $11.77. You look at you look down at the residential water rates at the bottom per thousand. So that base rate includes the first 2,000 gallons of water. If you look at the bottom, the residential rate for 1,000 gallons after that went from 269 to 302. And then for commercial, it goes from 401 to 449. And again, I've got some charts and later in the presentation that will show you what an overall, let's say a residential water sewer connection or water sewer user, how it affects their monthly bill.
Okay, so for the board and the finance committee, what Kendall is proposing in these numbers is in 2023, going to the community, residential community, with a 12% increase in water rates. He pointed out 12% sounds high. I will tell you that I don't think he hasn't gotten there yet, but the price of just commodities on the sewer side especially, those numbers, and I think you'll get to them, but they just jump because of inflation. I mean, they're through the roof.
Yes, that is correct, yeah.
So it's somewhat less painful when I see we're going to go from $10.51 to $11.77. But this will be something new for our community to experience.
Yes, that is correct.
So we need to be prepared for that.
Yeah. Yep. For example, on our operations and maintenance, on the electrical side, we had to increase we're a big user of electricity. We got a lot of pumps, treatment plants that we maintain. We budget, $200,000 to $400,000 per division for electricity cost. When you look at, when we reach out to the electric companies every year, our main company that we use had an 8% increase.
Yeah.
So it's passing down to the end
Electric's
user.
up, fuel's up,
Yep.
commodities are up. Yeah. What'd you
Mayor.
have, Betsy? Yeah.
The concern I have with this, although I understand costs are up, but we also can't forget costs are up for our households and our citizens that are here. It's hard for me as a citizen even to hear what great shape the city is in. Record tax, right? With inflation, you have that. It hurts households, but your taxes are up because everything's more expensive. So therefore, your 4% tourism tax, you're generating more because the percentage is on a higher price. I don't know how we justify when we're in the position we're in right now of asking our citizens for more money. I get, to us, we can go, it's $1.20. Okay, if it's only $1.20, then don't ask for it. I feel like we should save this for years when we really need it. And I don't think we need it. My 2 cents.
Thank you for sharing that, Betsy. This will require, I don't know how much time we have to discuss this topic. Is there any board or finance committee, would you like to share this? This is a big ticket item. Daniel?
Kendall, I was just curious, I kind of jumping ahead on you to your last 2 slides, but what is Broken Arrow and Joplin doing differently than us that they're lower in the cost scale than we are? It'd be your last 2 slides before the end.
Which slide are you on?
Your rate comparison with cities, those 2.
These two?
Unless the chart's flipped around, just looks to me like Branson is in the middle of the chart in your spreadsheet, but then it's,
So this particular chart, so last year, when we presented our rates to the board, one item that was brought by the board was how do we compare with other cities that have tourism dollars coming in or other special taxes, right? How does that compare? And so that's what this slide is for. It's hard to make apples and apples or apples to apples out of this because taxes are different across the board there. So we try to this is our best effort at trying to display or show that. With, you know, Branson with its tourism tax, you see on the left side on residential water rates, we're, you know, second from the bottom here. If you look at the commercial, we're more in the middle. So we, the board some time ago, you know, has chose to put more of the weight of the water and sewer system on the commercial side versus the residential side. And then also, you know, we looked at population equivalency, I want to say. So obviously with our 12,000 population, it's a little different. Our system is unique. We're serving 60 to 80,000 people a day. And so we'd have more lift stations than the normal city. We have more water system than the more normal city. Even though the city's split up into 3 different water systems, we have more components. And then one thing that's significantly different is we have a surface water treatment plants. Surface water treatment plants cost more to operate versus a lot of these other companies or a lot of these other entities that have wells. So the city at one time chose to go the more sustainable route. We have Lake Taneycomo as our source water, and what that did for the community and for Taney County is reduce the load that's on the water table itself. And as you know, across the country, especially over in the West, water is a hot commodity right now. And so surface water is the thing. And so Branson set themselves up well with the surface water plant. Even though it does cost them a little bit more, it is more sustainable and it's a solid stream of source for us. So.
Kendall, I got a quick question for you. Water District 3, have we ever looked into taking that over?
Yes.
Would that be profitable? Would it be able to lower the rates in that district?
So,
how would that work?
That is a very deep subject. There's a lot there, and it's been brought to my attention multiple times of when are we going to buy out Public Water District 3, or can we do it? Same for Missouri American. Unfortunately, we had the opportunity to buy the Missouri American system back, but it's, in my opinion, at the time and based off of the information that I've received over the years, it's when it was the same time the landing was taking place. The dollars went towards the landing. I think we could have bought that whole system for roughly $2 million at the time, and now it would cost significantly greater to purchase that system. There is some Missouri state statutes that allows us to buy them out, but it's going to cost us, and it'll cost the citizens of Branson.
Yeah, Alderman Rodriguez, that is an excellent question. And I tell you, I think that question and a couple others are deserving of their own meeting, so we can thoroughly discuss that. With the information we have, I don't know how many more speakers we have. He hasn't even got to sewer yet. Just saying.
We will obviously need another session. But the reason we've got Kendall first is because of the complexity of the rate, not just the rate model, but what he has to go through in order to get it adopted. So he's key for tonight.
But if I'm understanding correctly, on this topic of your projected or suggested water rate increase, that this budget is coming to the board in just a few weeks. And that Betsy brought up a great point, and I was curious of what other points are, because it sounds to me like we're needing to make that decision today so they can plug it into their model that they're going to present to us to vote on in a few weeks.
And Ben could address that, but Ben probably has some numbers plugged in, so I don't know if there's a level of numbers plugged in already.
Yeah, what I typically do in this instance, Kendall's rate model is the Bible for the budget, so it follows his rate model. It won't take much to change what he modifies in his rate model, whatever decision's made, in order to get it in our information and then out.
Yeah, I'm just raising the question.
Yeah, that's a
I don't
good
know if we're
point.
going to have another opportunity to sit and discuss this before you're presenting the final product to us.
And what our plan right now is the first and second readings at the 2 meetings in November. Obviously, we can push that, but we can't push it much more.
So I guess I'm just raising the question. Should we take the time right now to
Yes.
try to answer this?
Yes,
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's what I was feeling.
absolutely.
So I'm open for input.
Yeah, I think, I certainly get what Betsy's saying. I know, Kendall, when we talked about this last year, I've been on Water District for water. I've been on city water before, on city sewer. I get my bill, and it seems like, relatively speaking, for this proprietary service that the city's offering, we're pretty low when it comes to rates. And so, I get what Betsy's saying. I think this is one of those few areas where we're kind of in this gray area of it's, we're government, but we're kind of operating a private endeavor here. And so, with that, there are costs, and not that it makes it right, not that it makes it agreeable, but, I don't think anybody can deny that costs to deliver that type of service have gone up. And where we can't necessarily adjust for that in other areas of the city, right? Like, we can't account for the fact that it costs you more to fix a lift station necessarily, or that it costs us more to repave a road. We don't have a direct impact or way necessarily to adjust for that on the fly like we do with this one. And so it's tough. And when you see historically we've done 2%, now there's this 12% proposal. Percentage wise, that's high. Obviously, it's a big jump. I think if you look at the dollar amounts and it's kind of a nominal change, relatively speaking. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a tough call on this, and I don't know if there's a right way to handle it. But this is just one of those areas where it seems like we have kind of just a unique way to handle this versus some of our other costs that we're not always able to control, I guess is my point.
Yeah, and for us, this is our sole source of funding besides the tourism tax. Tourism tax goes for the big projects, but we don't, for example, like the fire department, police department, they have the safety tax, plus they're getting general revenue funds as well. We just have our water sewer rates itself.
When you say that, I think Betsy made a great point. I know this is your only source of revenue, but in the bigger picture, our sales tax have dramatically increased. Our tourism tax has dramatically increased. If the city is generating additional revenues because of our economy, I can see if I was, not if, I'm a homeowner and I pay my water bill, but if the city is doing well, then I'm questioning where the justification is to raise my water rate. You have extra monies coming in, city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think therein lies the issue, right?
Yeah, I was looking for your opinion.
Well, I guess Ben, and throughout this process, what we heard a few weeks ago is, there was all these requests, all these capital items, and I think universally, if you look through the budget book, I don't know if you ever said no in any step along the way here. It doesn't seem like you said no, which is awesome. It doesn't feel like, no, I'm kidding. So, kind of thinking about it, bigger picture, if you backed this out, does it take away our ability to do one of those capital items that was otherwise approved? Does it take away our ability to do something in IT or, some of these other departments. So I get what you're saying, but I think it's just one piece of the puzzle. We'd have to just see what that, if you bump it back down, taking into account that revenues are up, does that eliminate our ability to do something else?
Hey, Ben, we have a fancy dancy opportunity to change that to a 2% number. If we change it to 2%, you're shaking your head, yes, Kendall, is that going to prevent us from doing other capital improvements?
Obviously, Ben's and his group's going to have to run the numbers. But just looking at the capital list, now step up and say something if I'm wrong, but if you look at the capital list, there's the list that was given, they're only going a certain amount down that list.
Yes.
That list is being postponed
Sure.
until additional revenues come on for next year, and that you can able to add more capital next year. But right now, yes, it's the way even without water and sewer dipping into the general fund, you're not able to complete all your capital that's been put on the table.
Well, and just one example I was thinking of as we were kind of talking about this is, Chad pulled back the request for the GIS person. Well, that's based on the 12% increase. That was taken off the table. So that would just be the only kind of caution I would have is if we lower that back down, does it change something else or do we lose something else? When, in this one particular instance, this service that we're offering at a significantly less rate than what the private industry is offering it at, is this, should we keep that in mind, basically?
And your vote would be?
Well, until I see how it affects it, I don't know.
Okay, well,
Hey, Kendall, down here.
Sorry.
So you mentioned there was a list of capital projects that you wanted to do. Is there a way to, and based on priority, I know that some are more important than others, but is there a way to group them so there's similar projects and increase the buying power that you would have and maybe get a unit discount that would bring the overall cost of the improvement down?
I would say typically no on that. The prices, obviously with the, with the pumps and stuff. Now, we do some grouping, like, for example, our lift station rebuild and replacement pumps. We do group those together to try to get a better cost on those. But a lot of times, again, they're site-specific or component-specific items that it's hard to group those things to do that, so.
Kendall, we've been having this conversation for a long time, a lot of years.
Yes.
And everybody's hesitated on putting any increases, which is why, you see the 2%. I mean, but we knew this day was coming, right? I mean, we knew, and we kept putting it off, and we kept putting it off. And I agree with Betsy right now when we're saying we're doing so well at the city, we've got all these additional dollars, and then come and ask the citizens for an increase. But, we had we've had some exceptional years. That's not always going to be the case. And if we keep putting this off, I'm afraid, and I don't know that it needs to be the whole 12%. I mean, I'm just saying, if we keep putting this off, we just keep cutting our nose off, right? I mean, because, again, Betsy, when you and I served on Finance Committee years ago, several years ago, we were having this conversation, and we saw the projections, and we knew that costs were going up and expenses were going up and different things. And I just think at some point you have to pull the Band-Aid off, and you have to address and you have to do something. Otherwise, we're just going to keep having this conversation over and over and over again, and we're going to have to keep giving up projects that are needed. We've got some that, are, in my opinion, getting close to critical, right, that we've got to carry through and get done. We've got things that we know that we have to have ongoing dollars spent on for maintenance, updates, upgrades, whatever. How are we going to pay for that? And so I just think it's worth, I'm not saying one way or the other, but I just think it's food for discussion if we're talking about it today. We keep saying, well, we need to increase rates, but then we never do it. And today, we're looking at a situation where, you know, it's a significant, if we'd been doing this a little bit at a time, it might not be so shocking today, but we haven't. We've chosen not to, so.
So, and what's made it worse is, you know, we've had some really good years, like 2021, and 19 was great. 20 wasn't as bad as what we thought it was going to be for the utilities. 21 was good. 22 is looking really good. But you got to keep in mind that I can't say that we took off or done away with projects, because we never do. Components have to be replaced at some point in time. We've postponed capital for 2020, 2021, and especially in 2021 and part of 2022, you've seen a lot of emergency purchases where we had pumps and components and things break down that we've had to dip into our internal services funds to be able to replace those. Again, back to the big ticket items that's driving this cost, and that is, again, postponing capital for the last 2 years. The salary adjustments, the new positions, and then, again, the big one is our water tower maintenance. But I've got coatings that are failing. We had 2 emergency purchases last year with water towers that were leaking that we had to have emergency services come in and fix. It's just due to postponements.
Okay. Help me connect the dots. We have, give or take, 5,000 single-family residential properties in Branson, of which there's only a percentage of those served by City of Branson water.
Correct.
If all 5,000 homes had $1 a month increase, that would equal $60,000. I am confident we're not sitting here talking about $60,000.
No, so what you're not missing, or what you're missing here, let me jump forward here.
Oh, is the commercial rates.
Okay, so combined, so this is the in dollar amount. So if you look at
So the monthly difference would be $4, not $1.
exactly, so that was just on the base rate. So what we do is we give you an example for residential. If somebody using, let's say, an average of 5,000 gallons a month, typically most residentials don't. They're more around the 3,500 to 4,500 range, whatever. But we threw $5,000 in, or 5,000 gallons in there. So again, the difference per month is $2.23 for water, $1.78 for sewer, and that's $4 a month combined bill. And now where your commercial sees it, hits the commercial a little harder. Again, and this is based off of 100,000 gallons. So that's, it just depends on the commercial business. That doesn't mean every commercial business is going to raise this amount. This is just an example. So it depends on each user and how much water they use. They pay for their share. So this example would be $131 a month for a commercial business with 100,000 gallons, and that's a 2-inch meter. So.
Pam and Betsy, in the past, have you had discussions where you considered keeping the residential rates at the 2% and allowing the other rates to affect the commercial, with the theory that the commercial side is driven more by the tourism? I know I'm talking about all the business owners will have a higher fee, but have you considered separating out those increases?
I believe we have. I believe we've even, when I was on the board, had 2 different levels of a percentage for residential. Kendall, you may
So
be there,
right
but
now,
I'm pretty sure we have done that.
yeah, so historically, it's been the same percentage increase across the board for both water or for both residential and commercial. It's just the way it's set up in the fee structure, it's the commercial, it soaks up a higher percentage of the overall cost by being an increase there. It would take some calculations and some work to try to figure out what would the offset be if you kept water or kept water, sewer, residential at the, say 2%. Okay, what's it going to take to make up in the commercial side? It may not be 12%. It may be 20%. It just depends on that calculation. We have to dig into those numbers to see what that would look like. So.
Didn't we do that one year, though? Didn't we do like more of an increase on the commercial side? I thought we did.
No.
And kept the, because I remember the conversation around, is that a deterrent to business, coming in if, on the costs of that, talking about the hotels and different things. So I thought maybe we had done that once, but maybe it was discussed and it wasn't implemented. I'm not
And you
for
may be
sure.
referring to our system connection charges?
No, that was different. I remember because we talked about those and we
Yeah.
went down the whole list of fees that the city charges, animal control, I mean, all of it. We went through all of those fees, but specifically on the water sewer, because this is always a hot topic, I thought one time we did. But I know we talked about it, but I'm not sure if it was ever
I'm
moved
like you, I think
forward.
it was discussed, but I can pretty confidently say it's been straight across the board for several years.
So Ben, let me ask you for your guidance here. Unfortunately, we are rapidly running out of time. We're going to lose 2 aldermen in about 35 minutes. I understand there's a lot of presentation left. There's a lot more information that we need to know.
Yep.
However, I'm just hung up on, this is a big decision that needs to be made before you can wrap up your budget.
Right.
What would you recommend, knowing how much more material there is to present, and we still need to answer this topic, and I don't know if there's other questions that need to be answered for you to move forward. What's your suggestion on, with the time we have, how would you allocate that?
You've got, yeah, and it does, it is 30 more minutes before somebody has to leave, 2 people have to leave. I think we've got, I'm gonna let Lisa speak up here too, but we've got next Tuesday's study session reserved in its entirety for budget. The 11th, is that right, Lisa?
Yeah, we didn't, we have reserved that, and not booked anything. I mean, you have it scheduled, we just don't have anything on the agenda that, I blocked it and didn't have anything. But that's an hour and a half to hour and 15 minutes only.
I know this conversation can go 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. It's just coming down to what is it that feels right for the board. But I know you've got to get your public hearing in one day. Do you know when he schedules for a public hearing for the rates?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we've got him, the end of the month, right?
end of October.
So we have that public hearing prior to the budget, so we can get those numbers in.
Yeah.
Okay, so, number one, that's an excellent idea. We'll have an hour and a half this coming Tuesday to finish whatever we need to finish to help you move forward. In the meantime, we really got to take a short break.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll take a recess
Absolutely.
as you come up with the solutions. Thank you. call the meeting back to order. We have about 30 minutes remaining. Ben, what I'm going to suggest, do we have everybody here? We're missing, there she is.
Yeah, here she comes.
What I'm going to suggest is, let's move on from this topic, allow you the time to provide us with more information. For example, at our study session, if you would provide us information on the impacts of this decision that we're making in a couple different scenarios. I'm open for board's ideas. One scenario I'd like to see is if we kept the residential at 2%, commercial went to 12%, what that would look like financially, what the trade-offs are. So maybe a couple different scenarios of what trade-offs are we looking at depending on which decision we make. It'll help us make a more informed decision.
Yeah, absolutely, we can do that. We can, that's wouldn't be a problem. I do want to address something that was put out there in the public. We need to put in context.
Sure.
So, and this is more for the directors or whoever's listening. The statement was made that the city is flush with cash. You got to put that in context. If you read the document, and I know everybody will that's listening and in this room, there's $157 million in projects over 5 years. 31 of those million are in 23. We're only funding maybe 20 of those because we can't get all the way down the list. We're staring at 50 next year. In his rate model, he's only got 1 million of them. That's what's funding that 12% is funding. And he's got 3 million. He's got 3 million in 24 that needs to be funded, and he's only got 1 million there. So he's going to carry $1 million over from 23 to 24 and only fund 1 million out of 5 of the carryover. It's going to continue to compound.
Yes.
And to what your point is right on the money. At what point down the road do you have a conversation about a much higher percentage you're going to need that year? That's the question. Is when do you want to have that conversation? And because your point is valid, very spot on. The public's paying for inflation. My worry is the projects he's postponing are going to be hit equally with inflation. He's got steel, he's got metal, he's got asphalt. Those things are going up 19, 20% pops. If we don't do it now, that 10% just went to 20. The 20 might even go to 25 the next year. That's a compound multiplier. I'm just saying those are the consequences. It's you guys' decision on what you want to do, but there's consequences to everything. Sure. But we can definitely do that, Mayor.
Go ahead, Cody.
Well,
Hold on, Cody.
I think, to kind of, I see a 12% increase, which leaves a deficit of 482,000. We talked about needing the employees. We need to do these things, and even at 12%, it's still a deficit. So that was kind of the point of my comment was, I get, we don't want to raise that rate if we don't have to, but I think we have to ask the question, the tough question, do we have to? And I think when you look at kind of overall big picture, the relatively small increase of this in the grand scheme of things, there's still a deficit. And so do you cut one of those positions? Do we cut something else? And so that was sort of the point of my comments. Not that I just want to raise rates because we can, but I think this is, kind of the reality we're faced with.
Alderman Cooper?
Well, and you don't stay flush if you keep dipping into the same bucket. I mean, I always try to compare my business to when we're in a situation like this. And yeah, we might have had a couple of great years, biggest years of our business, and the bank account's sitting pretty, but everything else has gone up. It costs more for toilet paper in the restrooms and soap and paper towels. The cups cost more to concessions. Popcorn bags cost more. And we chose to raise our ticket price $1 to $2 because do we have the money in the account? Right now we do. But as they keep going and we keep dipping, in the end, the end user is going to be affected.
Yeah.
I mean, it ain't good or something I like, but.
Is there another scenario you'd like to see him consider?
I don't know. I mean, I think your idea of maybe having a different percentage for commercial versus residential is not it's worth looking at, for sure.
That's what I'm hearing, the group say, 2% of residential and 12% of commercial. That's one of the scenarios, right? I think that balanced against 2% across the board is probably the two scenarios you're looking at. What the impact, you've got the 12% right here, but any more than that, it's going to be infinitesimal just choices behind that. But I think those are the two, Mayor, if I might, those are probably the two scenarios that we're looking at, right?
But also Betsy or Pam raised the question, is that going to make people go, well, God, opening a business there and they're making us pay, I mean,
Exactly, yeah.
that's also, could be a red flag as well, you know?
I think another thing that continued to come up that is just passionate for me, and I will always, always have this stance. Just like public safety tax was passed with a promise to citizens of what it would be used for, the tourism tax, for some of you that maybe weren't here at the time, was passed with the promise of this will guarantees you will not have water and sewer rate increases. Now, Pam and I see so many things the same. We've lived through this how many different years? And I agree, there comes a point in time that you can't just keep saying, well, we have a tourism tax, we have a tourism tax. I just feel so passionate about priorities. I don't like priority-based budgeting because I don't feel like our priorities were really in line. But man, when do we stop going back to the citizens? When do we fix our priorities? Kendall has been put on the back burner year after year, told there's not money, told he can't fix this, told he can't fix that, things that were hugely important. So what has to give to get Kendall and his department right? Is the first answer, well, let's just raise rates? I don't know, and that's where Ben comes in to say, to be able to show these scenarios, to say, okay, if you don't, instead of, just like fire, instead of just saying, and please, no, you can't hire more guys. No, here's our needs, now come in from the back door and figure out how to meet the needs, don't cut the needs.
So we'll bring that back. I know for the sake of timing, I'd like to take a left turn, or a left turn and put police up here. Because Jeff's he's going to be out of pocket next week, the chief.
Really quick.
And
Yeah,
police-
before we do that, let me just
Go
get a
ahead.
couple quick
You betcha.
comments. Chuck, how do you feel?
Not for raising rates by any means. I know it's only a few dollars, but inflation's up right now. I mean, a few dollars could help, these families, and I'm sure we could find the money elsewhere. Next year, we could revisit it, in my opinion.
Okay,
No offense to you, Kendall. I mean, I know you're juggling a lot of balls, but you come to us, we'll find the money, I think.
thank you.
Kendall, didn't you buy down that 12%? It was a 15% before, right?
So when I originally put the model together, I was pushing 20%.
20%, you
And
bought
I've-
it down with that
And I've kept narrowing it
450,000?
down and narrowing it down. Now, this is just for water. Now, the sewer rates are shown here at 7% for 2023.
Okay. And so my point being, for a very, very, very long time, and to Ms. Pam's point, the citizens, the residents of the community have been getting a high-quality product. We're talking about cost, but let's talk about the product that this department has produced. They've been getting, and it's kind of one of the things I was most proud of whenever I went through, when I went through the departments, was that we are delivering a product that is equal to or above supremely large municipalities. I mean, to bigger cities. Our little town is delivering to its residents the highest quality product that it can, and we're giving it to, they're purchasing it at a substantially less rate because we've been able to offset those costs for so long. And everything being equal, we're looking at the expense of catastrophic, failures. That's like a NASA term, which means life lost.
Yeah.
But here's the life of the product delivery system that we're trying to maintain. And, there's got to be a break point where, does it all have to be at one time? Well, they've kept it at bay as long as they can. I think we're at that critical point where we have to exercise some sense of moving forward to be able to accommodate those things, because we can't just keep kicking the can down the road.
I mean, costs are just going to continue to go up. I mean, we looked at, one of the projects he presented to us earlier, I think it was last week, where if it was done 2 years ago, it was a couple $100,000. Now it's $600,000.
Sure.
And that's what we're looking at, and we can't afford, because yes, we're looking good now as a city, but in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, some of those numbers can change, and dynamics can change, and obviously costs are going up, so.
Thank you, Ralph. Kathy, any quick 2 cents?
So I look at this as the primary fundamental responsibilities of local government. Among other things that we do, the two main things we are is public safety and utilities. Those to me are the two most critical things for quality of life, for protecting life, frankly. And I come from the Great Lakes states, and I get really, really nervous when I hear about deferred maintenance and trying to skip along and whistle past the graveyard when it comes to maintaining wastewater treatment plants or drinking water plants. Because I come from an area very near Flint, Michigan, and I will tell you, during my past life and my past experience, that Flint, Michigan story continues today. People don't think of Flint, Michigan anymore as the UAW, Powerhouse, GM, all these great companies. They don't think of Flint anymore. They think of Flint as contaminated water.
Yeah.
And that would blow up our perception of our town across the country. And if you want to talk about a devastating impact to tourism income, that would do it. Instantly national and forever can destroy our reputation. And I don't want to sound hysterical, but I've seen what happens on the front lines. And so I'm very supportive of the plan that Kendall's put together. And yet I'm also a fiscal conservative like you all, going, I don't want to raise rates either. At some point, something's got to give, because man, are they going to be mad at us if all of a sudden the toilets don't flush, or they're backing up in basements, or you got contaminated drinking water. And that's a whole nother story. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and, I'm sorry, Lisa?
Well, just one comment. You still need a public hearing, so you'll have even whatever's decided, you'll have a public input yet.
So when is,
As soon as we schedule one, which we had it at the end of the month, but I just want to make sure that there's still another level of comments yet to come.
yeah, and maybe during that public comment, it'll be healthy to have some alternatives to present also, to get public input. Thank you.
Absolutely, we can do that. That's not a problem. Absolutely.
Okay, you have 14 minutes.
Yeah, and the chief said he didn't hold a lot of time from you guys.
Hold on. Thank you, directors, for letting me get up here. I'm out of town next week, so I appreciate your indulging me. A couple of clarification points, if I can. Betsy, you asked about the staffing study and all of that, and where did the information come from? 2019, I sent a lieutenant to a management college. The capstone project for the students in that college was to do whatever a police chief asked. We were the first agency out of the state of Texas to be able to get a capstone project, and I asked for a staffing study. The students in that class did a staffing study based on response times, calls for service, our layout, 22 square miles, how our neighborhoods are laid out, our call volume, the work that we do in the department, and all of that. That staffing study was supervised by the PhD that runs the program there. They came back to me and they said, if you have all of your police officer positions filled, 56 positions that we're asking for, police officer, sworn officers, you should have enough to do the job that you're called to do. 2019 numbers, our calls for service have not gone up that much. Dispatch numbers, they said we need some help. We need some help with supervisory staff. The dispatchers that are up there, I think I shared with the board, 2011, Chief Carol McCullough came up and asked for 4 additional dispatchers in 2011 because he had a need. He got 1 to bring the dispatch total to 11 dispatchers and 1 supervisor. I think I shared with you the struggle that I have in hiring dispatchers, 12-hour shifts, no breaks, they eat at their console. I gotta go to the restroom, take the radio, call me if you need me, that kind of stuff. I have to do better than that. I have to get them on 10-hour shifts. The 4 that we're asking for provides us the scheduling options to get us on a 10-hour workday. I got 2 dispatchers just got out of training. They've applied for other jobs because of the stress involved with a 12-hour workday. So I need to get there. The 4 positions that were listed up there were 2 dispatchers and 2 supervisors. My dispatch manager has the span of control of 11 people. If I put 4 more under him, blows him out of the water. 2 of those positions that I'm asking for are supervisors to cover either half of the day with him in the middle, right? The police service assistant that was up there, that's a civilian position that we added some time ago when we lost our parking enforcement officer downtown. I retooled that position. That person helps us with a lot of the walk-in reports, a lot of the online reports during COVID. We created an online reporting system. That position is a force multiplier, allowing my officers to stay in the field longer, not having to come to the station. The police sergeant position I'm asking for, back to the study. Jeff, you need more help supervising field incidents. Under previous administrations, I was told that patrol supervisor that's out there on the streets is equivalent to a battalion chief. If they can't handle it, get one that can, right? That's bad juju. I need to have a couple of sergeants out there in a perfect staffing model. Betsy, to your point about how many do we have out there, on a perfect staffing model with an overlay shift, I should have 9 cops out there. 9 cops, 1 supervisor, huge span of control. If I have 2 incidences at the same time in the city, I gotta have somebody to cover both, right? The administrative responsibilities that we have now compared to 20 years ago, completely different game. So that's why we're asking for that. The police lieutenant that was up there, I've actually talked with Ben and Jan and said, hey, let's put that one on hold, similar to what Chad did. I couldn't fill it today if you gave it to me, right? So put it on hold. As far as the budget goes in the police department, if you look at our budget, we're pretty lean. Most of our cost is in personnel. The thing that has gone up in our budget is the inflationary cost for our commodities. And then similar to what Kendall said, some of the purchases that we would have requested as one-time purchases or capital that are less than $25,000 are rolled into, that's the position control thing. Yeah, are rolled into the budget. Some of those capital one-time requests that we're talking about, personal protective equipment for crowd control, we're trying to build an inventory for that. Some munitions, because we're gonna be able to have 2 platforms, shotguns and rifles, stuff like that, some training stuff. I've also included an increase in my training budget. Remember we talked about sending people to the academy? I've put money in there to fund 4 people to go to the academy in '23, right? I'm sending 8 in January of '23, another 4 in June, July, something like that.
So what you've mentioned, Chief, is these are in Ben's numbers, right? Yes, that's the
All
good
those
news.
positions.
That's great.
And we would pull out the lieutenant position, and that would save, some
That's
money
great.
there. As far as capital goes, once again, we're very lean. I talked to the boss yesterday. We're lean for a reason. We need a building. Equipment-wise, I would put us, equipment-wise, up against anybody. If you look at our capital, we're asking for a drone. I think this is the 4th year we've asked for the drone. And that's a citywide asset, not a police asset. We just happen to have the pilot, and then 2 vehicles. That's what we're asking for. Vehicle replacement that we was end of life, and we downed it 2 years ago. And then if you look in the parking lot, I've got one that looks like a police car that says civilian on the side. I want to get that civilian out of that police car looking one and put him in a pickup truck. That's what we're asking for. So open to any questions.
So could I recap by saying that what you've asked for, pretty much your needs are being met with this budget. You just need the personnel.
I think the personnel are cooked in there.
No, the
what I heard.
dollar amounts are, you just need the physical bodies.
Yes, we're
Yes.
hiring mayor.
Yes, okay. And there was a question, Pam?
To say, listening to you, Chief, I got a tear in my eye. I'm serious because I appreciate everything you and your staff do. And I know you've had struggles, but anyway, in my opinion, I think what you've asked for is very reasonable. So that's just my 2 cents there.
Thank you for that compliment. And our staff, they work very hard every day. to make sure that the needs of the citizens are met.
I didn't see in your budget hats. Just an observation.
I had a quick question, Chief. Do any of these numbers reflect part-time? Are you going to have any part-time officers?
So I'm considering part-time right now, and the only way that it's budgeted right now is if I take one full-time and make two part-time.
Okay.
So I would have to eliminate that full-time position, and I've considered that. Matter of fact, we've talked with Jan. We've got the go-ahead to do that. I've got one in the shadows that's wanting that. So that's a great possibility. Long-term, when you get us to the building, I would love to be able to staff a front desk because we're a tourist town with a part-time officer 5 days a week during business hours, so that if somebody, a tourist in town, has a question, they walk in and they're not talking with one of my, records clerk, they're actually talking with a uniformed officer.
Okay, so we can't have the part-time just as additional above your slotted personnel spots?
We could, that's just a budget item, sir, that we would just have to add in whatever hourly rate that would be with no benefits on top of it.
Because we do have at least one officer that left that wants to come back, right, part-time?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Keith.
Go ahead. Betsy?
Oh, go ahead.
Quick question for you. When you talk about the funds for the academy, you're sending 4 officers there. That's one of those items, if I remember correctly from previous budget years, that used to come out of the general fund because it was part of the,
Tuition reimbursement program.
thank you, that got moved without the funds moving it. The cost for the academy got moved to public safety, but the funds did not transfer with the general. So therefore, that became an expense that you guys had to start absorbing within the department. Have you guys addressed any of that, or are you? Or do you have your hands full? And
That's a good question. What we've, maybe not to that degree, our biggest priority was to make sure that both fire and police in that fund are on an increased scale into the out years. And that was probably a bigger priority than just one piecemealing their budget together. But I hear you, that makes total sense. And we can do that, that's not a problem. I can't imagine it's gonna be a whole lot of money. But we're in a position to where if we have an ability to take that one position instead of splitting 2, that's a conversation we can have. That's a conversation we can have and move forward. That's what I'm talking about, bringing stuff back to you guys to make a decision and move forward. May have that opportunity to talk about it this fall yet. We can do that, that's not a problem.
Cody, did you have something?
And as far as cost for that, $9,000 times 4 is what we're talking about.
Chief, I remember, seems like over the last year I heard the number, so 56 was the goal as far as officers. That number was reduced earlier this year, if I remember correctly, or late last year to account for some pay increases, correct? So the positions we saw earlier, the personnel, this gets you back to 56.
So Jan was talking about 3 frozen positions. Those were the positions that we used the compensation rates for the pay raise. So if we got those back, we would be at full strength, 56 authorized positions. Right now it would be 53 unless those get unfrozen. And that 56, the staffing study in 2019 told me I should be able to do the job that you're paying me to do with those 56.
Okay, I think you said this, I just want to make sure it's clear. This gets you back to those numbers.
Yes.
And it's budgeted and Ben's looked in everything.
That's my understanding. Ben, those 3 that we're talking about frozen are cooked into this budget.
The 56 are cooked in, plus the additional 7 that he's asking for is cooked into our budget. Is that correct? So it's not just bringing it from 53 to 56, it's including an additional 7 officers are in the budget that Ben presented.
4 dispatchers, a sergeant,
Yes.
and a police service assistant. There's a lieutenant in there that I would pull out this year.
Yeah.
And to Alderman Rodriguez's point, if the board is pushing or asking about part-times, that could possibly fund 2 or 3 part-time positions in and of itself, that one lieutenant's position. Yes.
Yeah.
So we're getting 56 plus the
Plus the, yeah. Those are baked in the numbers.
Are we still having any problems recruiting right now?
So, good news on that. We've got 8 or 9 in the background process right now. We've created a partnership with the Department of Defense. I'm sending Assistant Chief Schmidt and 2 to Fort Leonard Wood. They have it's called a Bridge Internship Program, and we've been authorized by the DOD to get involved in that. And that program basically says somebody that's 6 months toward the end of their contract, DOD will continue to pay them while we put them through a police academy. So we're going up there on a recruiting trip in a couple of days.
Chief, I just met Tuesday night at my neighborhood party. I met one of your new officers and one that's in the academy presently. Very nice guys, and I appreciate them coming out. So seems like you're heading back in the right direction as far as getting
We're doing
back to-
everything we can to target the right people. As far as the DOD goes, I don't know which one you met, but we have one that I interviewed when he was still in the Marine Corps in North Carolina. We did it by, online and offered him the job online.
On a different note, as far as recruitment goes, are we looking at, because we want to get obviously the best people, we want people waiting in line to come to Branson. Are we looking at changing any of our policies, like allowing beards or molly gear or hats or tattoos? I mean, are we allowing?
So we allow tattoos.
Okay.
We've gone to a baseball cap for foul weather.
Okay.
And I continue to be asked about other things as well that we continue to consider. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Batman outfit?
We're not doing those hats up there, though.
I'm doing those hats. Lisa, if you, any other questions for Chief? Chief, thank you so much.
Thank
In
you.
fact, that was very encouraging to hear.
Thank you, Chief.
Very encouraging. Lisa, help provide me some guidance. We have, thank you for reminding me, at next Tuesday's study session, we can continue these topics. However, we're going to be missing a couple aldermen, right? Cody won't be here.
I think everybody else will.
Ruth won't be here.
She's going to attend by Zoom.
Oh, by Zoom.
Yeah.
Are you here? Who else wasn't going to be here?
Chuck's not going to be here Monday night.
Yeah, Monday I won't.
But you'll be here for Tuesdays. Okay, so Lisa, do you think in an hour and a half?
So can we move it up at all? Is there availability to move that a little earlier?
Have you
That's-
put anything in executive session that's going to keep us here till midnight?
I did not, but I believe the Honorable Mayor Milton has put something in the closet.
How's that bus feel?
That bus, yeah, exactly right. How did the aldermen feel about, well, first off, any idea of how much more time, you know what the remaining material we'd like to hear? Ted needs 5 minutes?
Ted needs 5 minutes. How much time do you guys need?
Does that mean Ted can come up right now for 5 minutes?
Well,
that mean?
there's a couple of you going to be leaving.
They've
so,
gotta go.
Yeah, we can't do
You
that
guys
today.
got 5 more minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what, the conversation we're having today, this is exactly what we need. And on honesty, I'd rather put a meeting together next Tuesday and then potentially another one to make sure you guys have your answers
That's great. So why
for
don't we,
everything. Give you time to do that.
is the board interested in meeting, what, at 4 instead of 4:30? Is that what you're thinking?
Whatever, but that'll make a long evening. But yes, I think, to come together, to me, it's easier to come together if you have the time in one day than try to find other days. But that's the board's pleasure.
Well, doesn't it also include the Finance Committee?
That's correct.
Yes.
Who's left today? Just Chief, Fire Chief?
Who's
No,
left
we
today?
had everybody today.
No, yeah.
Don't
And
forget
to be
Keith.
done.
No, who didn't get a chance besides
All the
Keith?
directors.
So on the order, the agenda will be the wrap-up of Kendall's information. Then we've got Keith and Cindy coming up. We've got Public Works and Parks. Those are the two big line
Sounds-
departments. We've
10
got
minutes.
Police and fire behind that. Well, of course, police just went. And then it's all the administrative departments, but that is.
But
not-
other than that,
Other than that, yeah.
okay, I'm gonna ask the board if they would consider amending our study session to 4 o'clock instead of 4:30. We'll need a press release announcement put out for that.
Sounds like we need 3
And
o'clock.
then after that, did you have something, Betsy? What's that?
And I don't know what everybody's schedule is, but instead of, I mean, what if you guys didn't have a study session that night, if you have executive to make, so you don't have to miss another day, and have a separate day where it's 2 to 6? Like, instead of everyone, so we all gave up time today, and then we're gonna be here at 4 o'clock, we know we're not gonna get finished, and then we have to come back again on another day for 2 more hours. Pick a day, as best you can anyways, and say, you know what, 3 to 6. I mean, I can't imagine 3 more hours isn't gonna cut it, and you guys don't have a 4 to midnight.
Okay, so you're suggesting
Meeting.
keep the study session at 4:30. It'll give us an hour and a half. We know we're not going to get done then.
I wouldn't do it at all at the study session. Pick another day
But
that it can all be
but
done
we
at
already
one.
have a scheduled study session with no topic.
I'd put Kindle in that topic.
Oh, yeah, we need Kendall.
At least have a half hour.
So there's
for
an
him.
hour and a half because we're halfway through the water and we haven't even got to the sewer.
Exactly. I'd put Kindle in there.
Do we need to do 3?
Do it next Tuesday. Let's do it earlier.
Yeah.
And let's knock it out and get her done.
Go 1 o'clock? No, wait.
I mean,
That, yes. Yeah, let's just get it done.
3 o'clock. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be 1, maybe 2 to 6, and maybe we celebrate because we got out by 5:30.
I love that
instead.
idea.
So you want to do it, so you're suggesting one day instead of splitting up into 2 days and starting at 1 o'clock
Then I'm gonna
and just
suggest we
power
do it on
through
a
it?
Friday, because it's a day that I don't work at all. Because I cut into my work schedule to be here to these.
About next Tuesday.
Crazy, isn't it?
If yours operates without you, mine doesn't.
Let's, okay. Okay, so, hearing all that, I'm gonna suggest keep the study session at 4:30, and maybe we'll set some time, set another 3 or 4 hours aside on another day and time. Are you shaking your head no?
The only thing I think that would be time sensitive is you have to have the public hearings and everything before next month, correct?
Yeah.
So if we push that out too much further, there might not be enough time allotted for that.
Oh, shush.
So I'm recommending next
This ain't our
Tuesday,
first rodeo.
Yes?
next Tuesday, I don't care if it's 1 o'clock, I don't care if it's 2 o'clock. I wouldn't go, I mean, 3 would be pushing it, but let's say 2 to 6, let's come in and get it done, and then you do your study session afterwards.
So
I don't
be it.
know. Oh, we are the study session, then you can go home.
Then there's a board meeting.
There's a board meeting.
Oh, you have
You're
board
talking
meeting?
about 12 hours.
And then closed session.
Then maybe we better start at 1.
Hey, I encourage it. Do it next Tuesday. Do it next Tuesday.
Because you won't be here.
Well, I mean, that's,
You're not gonna be done. What time are we gonna start, Cody?
Ralph is my concern right now. He's a bit.
I won't be here till after I'm done at the office then. I'll be here for our Alderman meeting, but I won't be here.
So you'll be here at 4:30.
Yeah.
And if he's not here, and you're not here, and Ruth isn't here, we won't have a quorum.
Ruth would count as a quorum
Ruth,
by,
yeah.
if we bring her in by Zoom, but we're just really tight on quorums.
Yeah.
We-
Okay, Daniel, you make the decision.
I like doing it all and getting it over with myself, but
One day.
What you
I'm
saw.
good, whatever.
Just if it helps any, what you saw with Chief Matthews, that's essentially the rest of the conversations right there. It's just like that. They're
You
gonna come
think
up
we can
and talk
get, you
about
think
what
we can
they're
get the
at.
rest done in an hour and a half?
That's a big question on what you do at Kindle. I don't think Kindle needs a whole lot more time.
we've been trying that for years.
I don't
In
think it's Kindle that
Kendall's
needs more time.
defense, we asked him the question, so,
Exactly.
anyway.
Exactly.
But,
Kendall, if you'd remove the part where you instruct us of how to change out a pump in the lift station.
or what about those projections? If you could get those out to us
Oh, yeah,
ahead
ahead
of
of time.
time so that we have looked at them before they're here? We can
Yep.
have our questions ready or whatever.
And we can just be ready for whatever we need to, if you got room left, we can just start adding departments in there, because we'll be here anyway.
Okay.
During the Board of Aldermen meeting. And the rest of them
Ralph, can you make 4 o'clock instead of 4:30? Okay, so the consensus is, we're gonna move our study session from 4:30 to 4. That will allow 2 hours remaining to conclude this. If it's not concluded, we're gonna have to pick another time.
Yep.
Kendall will be removed from the agenda.
Here.
No, we'll put Kendall last, so if we run out of
Yeah.
time.
I was thinking, put him last.
Chief?
If-
For those listening online, Chief Martin asked if we had any, looking through the material, if we had any questions in advance to provide to them, we could move through this quicker, and Betsy made a remark. Lisa?
I think not to, I think putting Kendall last might be a good idea. Because.
Wow.
Now let me go on, because I go back to, Kendall needs a public hearing anyway.
Anyway, yeah.
So if I can get a public hearing scheduled, I can also get him in and a public hearing in, and we can get that part requirement done. So if you let me finish, it wasn't that bad. Because if he gets to start first, he still gets a public hearing sometime. We have to have that. I have to have a public hearing.
And
So
that doesn't have to be during an Alderman meeting. Are you
I
saying?
just have to notice it up.
So are you saying that you could put out a notice starting at,
But not for Tuesday, probably. That'd be too soon.
Be the end of October.
But it'd be whenever we decide, but.
oh,
the-
I see.
the
He could do his presentation during the public
Public,
comment.
right, public hearing,
Public hearing.
but it has to be open, it has to be public. You have to take comments. We have to publish it in the paper. We've got to do all the.
So then everybody gets to listen to
Yes.
Kendall.
Yes,
not
and-
just us.
Right, and then we get that all done at once. Instead,
And that's the way it
otherwise.
should be, right?
And
The
otherwise
public
it'll
should
come-
hear this.
Yeah, so otherwise you're going to have to come back and still have a public
Very
hearing at
good.
another time.
Lisa, thank you very much.
And it still puts him last, I'm just saying.
That's wise. That's wise. Okay, I know these guys need to go. Any other closing comment? So study session is from 4:30 to, backed up to 4, correct?
We'll get it out tomorrow.
Any other brief closing statements? I truly appreciate this meeting. The level of information we're provided is second to none. And Ben, I take my hat off to you. Thank you.
Motions to adjourn, please. I got 2 committees.
Oh, are we going to close that? I need a motion to close the Finance Committee meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I need a motion to close the Board of Aldermen meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor,